You guys, happy Wednesday. Here we are once again doing another show.
Yeah.
And it seems like a lot of you guys were not familiar with this one. I think that maybe, if I remember correctly, I think Tammy recommended this. I remembered hearing about the book when it came out. The book came out in 1995, but it's a guy talking about abuse that happened to him when he was a kid, like in the 60s and 70s.
I've never heard of this case.
Yeah, like the book was a big thing for a minute, like in the 90s. It sold like bajillions of copies and was on the New York Times bestseller list for like a few years or something.
Damn.
And he was on Oprah and all that other kind of shit too.
Not too bad it's like Sybil's not true.
Well, that's okay. So I don't really know. Like I read a lot about this. I watched some, different like podcasts about it and stuff like that, both from a thing where it's like they're just taking his word for it, or like a completely skeptical point of view. I don't really know where I fall on it. It's just very ambiguous. As far as I would go, I think something happened for sure. Maybe he exaggerated it for the book. I don't know. um I don't think he made it up out of whole cloth. Some people think he did, but I don't know, because the thing about it is that this book, I feel like there had been ones like this before, but I feel like this book really kicked off like the whole misery lit or misery porn genre, I guess, with people doing memoirs, like talking about their horrible experiences as children, like child abuse and things like that. And all of those obviously aren't fake, because sadly, shit like that really does happen. And obviously, if people want to write a book about it, it's America. You can do whatever you want to. But on the other side of that, it does sell really well. You're going to get on TV. You're going to sell a lot of books and stuff like that. And I think that would probably incentivize certain types of people to just like make a fucking story up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't think that's the case with this guy entirely. I think maybe some of the shit might have been exaggerated, but I don't know. I wasn't there. Some of the things that, that were kind of famous, I'm thinking in particular of the book Go Ask Alice, which was written by Anonymous, and it was purported to be the real diary of a teenage girl, that was, published by and edited by this other woman. And we read it in school, I think. And it was just this teenage who got into drugs and, all kind of sexual escapades, and then ended up dying at the end. And I think it was like a cautionary tale. But it was discovered, I believe, much later on, that the book was a complete fabrication, that was not a real person. Just the woman that supposedly found this diary just wrote it like as a manuscript, and it wasn't selling. So she said, well, I'm just going to sell this as a true story. And then it worked. So sometimes if you if you have like a fucking really fucked up story that isn't selling as fiction, then you can just tweak it a little bit, say it really happened to you, and then you can maybe sell it to somebody.
I think a lot of shit's a fabrication.
Well, like I said, it's kind of shitty. I don't want to go down the road of like saying everything that everybody, because I know that we've done multiple cases. Look at the case of Sylvia Likens, for Christ's sake. That really happened. Like, that was very well documented, and that is a crazy story. If somebody wrote that as fiction, you wouldn't believe it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So shit like that does happen.
I've heard that even the Diary of Anne Frank is a work of fiction. That there was a girl named that, but that the diary was fabricated, and a dude fucking wrote it and sold it. I don't know if it's true. Anybody could come up and make allegations like that. But that's pretty fucking hardcore when you have shit having to do with the Holocaust that was faked. If it was. I don't know. That's something you have to look into. But
yeah, I never heard that it was fake.
Yeah, I heard that it was fabricated.
But I know for sure that, and we've
a lot of abuse cases were fabricated.
Well, we were just talking about before the show started. We were talking about Sybil, which we did a show about a long time ago, which was dissociative identity disorder, and I think they discovered later on that was largely fabricated also.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about DID, is that like a lot of psychiatrists, they can't really agree on whether that's really a thing or not, because if it is a thing, it's like so fucking rare. And some people are apparently like pretty good at faking it. So,
there's a lot of shit that people thought was true, and history that wasn't true, like Marco Polo. Marco Polo going to China. I was taught in school that Marco Polo was the first European to make contact with China and brought back noodles. All bullshit. There was no Marco Polo. Marco Polo was a work of fucking fiction back in the medieval ages. The original versions of it involve all kinds of mythological monsters and men without heads, just faces on their fucking shoulder, and dog men and shit like that. And the way China's described is fucking totally incoherent and incorrect in the first editions. It gets better as newer editions come out because people knew more about China. But it was like science fiction. There's some other shit that I suspect might not be true that's sold as history. Um, the French stories about Joan of Arc don't sound true to me. That sounds like religious mythology. Um, it was so long ago. How would you actually know? There'd be no eyewitnesses. They fabricated things back in ancient times and rewrote it as if it actually happened. But it may have started off as legend. Like Paul Bunyan. One day, someone 100, 200 years from now might think a Paul Bunyan actually existed. But there was no Paul Bunyan. That was an American myth. It's a legend. So some people have gone so far to say that Roman emperors were mythological. But no, somebody had to be emperor. We know the orders and the times in which they served, but even the ancient descriptions of the emperors contradict, depending on who's writing it. So some of the shit we just never know, especially if you go way back in time. But yeah, it's wild.
well, the thing about it is that it's not just black or white. It's like it could be that, yes, this person really existed, but they didn't do quite what was attributed to them, or they blew it out of proportion or something like that.
It's like if there was a historical Jesus, nothing of him survives. Everything we know about him from the New Testament was official church canon, and it had been picked through, and it was written, a lot of it hundreds of years after the shit had happened.
And we've talked about that. We've done multiple shows on that where it's just like, a lot of it was just other mythological figures that, they glommed some of that onto him, like as time went by and
some
stuff
of that
like
stuff
that.
Jesus is saying sounds like Socrates said that, I think they just attributed I don't believe there actually was a historical Jesus.
No, I don't think so either.
No, because what they're talking about is a Roman god. It's definitely it's like Dionysus.
Yeah, they stole some shit from
They stole shit from everything.
Everything that Jesus, let's have this guy
everything that Jesus does, everything Jesus says was borrowed from other religions that Romans believed in.
Yeah, I mean, all the big ticket items about Jesus, every single one of them comes from an older.
Even the birth narrative is Moses' birth narrative. So they're rebooting Moses. Running from a king who's going to kill the firstborn. That's Moses. But then they're going to in the New Testament. They're going for this big fucking what do they call it when you census? But then Herod decides to kill the firstborn because the stars said that a Messiah is going to be born, and the fucking wise men find him. Yeah, the star is pointing here. No matter where you stand, the star points there. It's an optical illusion. It's crazy. But no, if there was a historical Jesus, we don't have anything about him. It's been painted over with other stuff. But probably, most likely, there was no historical Jesus. It's a Roman god.
Gramther says, was Flowers in the Attic a true story? No, I mean, well, no, they never, that's,
give it a couple hundred years.
I'm sure you're joking.
Yeah.
But, it could have happened. It could have happened. There was nothing supernatural in there or anything like that. And I've read weirder shit than that, like happening in real life. But that was never purported to be a true story. I'm talking more about stuff that was like purported to be a true story, like Go Ask Alice, which turned out later not to be, that somebody had just written it as fiction. Graham just said, if I were to write a book about the shit I saw in 27 years of doing cop stuff, I'm sure a lot of things wouldn't be accurate. Yeah, that's another thing too, is that I think one of the main criticisms that Dave Pelzer gets for A Child Called It and he's written other books like more than those three, but there's three that are kind of just about him and that are about this abuse situation. And that people were like, well, he doesn't seem to remember like just regular family shit or regular day-to-day shit, but he remembers the details of the abuse really well. And I was like, well, that doesn't seem all that weird to me. Like I said, he might be exaggerating it for, the sake of the narrative, like so it is a readable story. I read like um the book, like I wanted to read the ebook, but I'm like it's $11. I'm like, bro, I'm not paying $11. But like just for the ebook. Like if it was $5 maybe, but just come on. But I did find like big chunks of pieces of it, like chapters. So I did read some of that. It's not super super well written, but that's pretty par for the course for these types of books.
Read what Zombie Burner says,
Where um
which I've never seen him in here before, but welcome to the show.
he's kind of right on Joan of Arc. Joan was a real person, but she wasn't a fighter. She mostly sang hymns and inspired morale, but she wasn't a fighter. Yeah.
Okay, but here's the problem with what you're saying. Jesus walked on water. He rose. He rose people up from the dead. He even survived crucifixion and went to heaven. He did all this stuff. You could say, well, that's just they're just. You could say, well, he was an actual historical person. It's just he didn't do all that stuff. That was just added to him later. And then we're not talking about the same person.
Then yeah, that's
Jesus
not the
walked
same
on
person.
water. Jesus fucking. That's the same as there was a dude named Clark Kent, and he did live in a big city, but it was called New York. He didn't fly, and kryptonite didn't bother him.
We're not talking about the same.
So now you're not talking about Superman. So
you're not talking about the same
so it's the same thing. Everything they're saying about Joan of Arc sounds like religious mythology because that's the same thing they would do to a saint.
Yeah.
So she's a French saint. And usually when saints and religion gets involved, it's fiction. So that means there was no Joan of Arc. Not the one you know. There may have been another one.
Yeah.
But that's not Joan of Arc.
I mean, she existed as a person, but it's like some of the stuff that's attributed to her.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. It's just... Whereas I think that, and Gramthers makes the point, if Jesus was actually a Hebrew man from 2,000 years ago, he would have been short, dark-skinned, and nappy-headed, not the Fabian look-alike in all the paintings. Yeah, exactly. So it's just kind of like...
There was no Jesus.
That's what... Well, no, that's what I'm saying. He said if he existed. That's what he said. So, yeah.
Jesus, if you actually look at Jesus and all the stories, it's a reboot of Moses, and it's in the form of Dionysus, a competing Roman god. Or demigod, kind of. Well, he was a god. There wasn't a historical. They were just rebooting Judaism for a Roman audience because a lot of Jews had moved into Rome and had lived there for a long time, and they wanted their religion to be acceptable to other Romans, and it had to be a Roman type religion, and it was going to. So they just rebooted Judaism because they didn't want all this child sacrifice, killing the firstborn, and all these hardcore rules about you can't lay with women or men or whatever. They didn't want any of that. They wanted something more metropolitan. So that's what Christianity was. It was just a Roman version of Judaism.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that obviously, by their very nature, a memoir is going to be filtered through the memories of the person writing it. That kind of comes with the territory.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of like coming at it from the point of view that's from their perspective. Maybe they weren't perceiving things correctly, or maybe if someone else saw the same incident they wouldn't see it the same, or maybe they're not remembering it right, or something like that. So I think that to an extent you can give memoirs a little bit of a pass because it's filtered through one person's experience, which may or may not be like super hardcore accurate. So it's not like you're writing a history where you got to like check all the, tick all the boxes and check your sources and stuff like that. This is one person's experience. And like I said, I don't really know. I mean, this guy, he did like make a career out of, being an author. He was in the military and shit too. We'll get into that. But being an author and being a motivational speaker and advocating for child abuse, various child abuse laws and things like that. So he did do something with it. I think another criticism he gets sometimes too is that he's kind of one of those, and you see this in the self-help kind of world, I guess, is that sometimes people that have been through like a lot of trauma and shit, will be like, hey, it's okay, like don't beat yourself up and everything like that. And then there's like the other camp that is just kind of like, oh, this, I'm glad this happened to me. It made me stronger. I'm not going to be a victim. And it's almost seemed like there seems when they go too extreme, it's almost kind of like they're saying that, people that are still having a hard time with it are just being pussies or whatever. And I kind of feel like he's a little bit more on that end of the spectrum, not quite as extreme as that. But that's all well and good if you went through this horrible childhood and you're like, oh, it just made you stronger and shit like that. But don't, I feel like other abuse victims sometimes catch strays in that sort of thing because it almost sounds like you're saying that it's like, oh, well, everyone should be like me, everyone should get over it, and everyone should, you know what I mean? And that's kind of not cool. But so he did make a career out of it. I'm gonna just kind of lay out the shit and I'll address a lot of the skepticism and shit at the end, and then we'll see how we feel about it. I'm not really sure how I feel about it. I kind of feel like there is enough documentation that I'm pretty comfortable saying that he probably was abused to some extent. Um, Spoiler alert, he was taken away from his family when he was 12 and put into the foster system. And it wasn't just they took all the kids away because he had a bunch of brothers. They just took him. And so obviously there was something going on. Like they don't just do that, especially back then, like in the 70s. They wouldn't just take you for no reason. So I feel like it had to be pretty egregious. Now, was some of the stuff exaggerated or he's not remembering it right or something? Perhaps. You know what I mean? Maybe he just wanted to make the book better or more harrowing or whatever, which, I guess it worked because it sold like a shit ton of copies. Although that's we'll get into that a little bit too. Like cuz there's a little bit of skepticism over how many copies it did sell a lot of copies. But there's some kind of how sometimes stuff that's on the bestseller list um it's because the author or like a group that knows the author like buys a fuck ton of the books like to drive it up the list. He's been accused of doing some shit like that. But he sells them like it is own, you know what I mean? Because they don't really count. If somebody buys the book, then it's on the bestseller list, because you sold X amount of copies. It doesn't really matter who buys them. They don't keep track of that. So some people have accused him of like buying like a fuck ton of his own books to drive it up the list. Because if it's up high on the New York Times bestseller list, then other people are going to buy it because they're going to hear about it, right? So
in those days.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So
Yeah.
it's and you're going to get on Oprah and shit like that, which he did. And I think he was on Montel Williams also.
Now nobody notices you.
Well, there's so many because of like, that, self-publishing and all this other kind of stuff. I do see, I mean, I guess because I read, horror and stuff like that. So I do see like when a horror book comes out that everybody's talking about, it does kind of filter down to me.
But is it in the New York bestsellers list?
Well, horror, not usually. Sometimes they are. Yeah. But
what's the name of the New York Times? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody gives a shit about their bestsellers list anymore. Everything's fucking internet driven.
But I feel like there's still like a huge market for self-help kind of books and memoirs and stuff like that. I've never really been into self-help books, so like I said, I don't I'm just kind of feeling like, well, it's whatever problems I have and shit like that, I'm like, that's just a person that wrote a book. They don't know me.
Yeah.
So it's like, what could they possibly tell me that's gonna help?
And what works for a woman doesn't work for men, too. Self-help, men. What works for men is suffering, going through rites of passions and trials. Yeah, getting through shit. That helps them. You can't talk a man out of his problems. You can with a woman, but you can't do that with men. It's weird. And some guys will back me up on that. Some guys who are psychologists will go, yeah, psychology doesn't really work on men. They have to fucking solve their shit physically. You got to just put them to work. Yeah.
Zombie Burner says, so real abuse, but how much of it is true, we're not sure. Yeah. I kind of feel like that's where I'm falling down on it. I don't want to go, because there was, I feel like back in 2002, New York Times Magazine did kind of an expose on this guy. And it was coming at it from a real skeptical point of view. And it's still online. Like it's on the Wayback Machine. It's about 9 pages long. And it's a pretty interesting read. So I did read that, and I can see where some of the criticisms are coming from, but I'm not coming from it from that much of a skeptical perspective where the author of the article like didn't say outright, I just think he made the whole fucking thing up. He was just kind of coming at it from, well, this person says this and this didn't happen and all this other kind of stuff. So it was just kind of because at this point, he was like such a thing, like a cultural thing in self-help that it's interesting that in just a few years after the book came out, like somebody was trying to like kind of take him down like that. Didn't seem to hurt him any though. Um, I don't really know if he wrote those 3 books that were kind of in this. A Child Called It was the first one, and then he wrote 2 sequels to that, kind of. And then, as far as I could tell, he wrote 4 more that were just kind of general, like self help kind of books. And I think the last one came out in 2009, so I don't think he's like written anything recently. But I think he like tours and like I said, he's like a motivational speaker and shit like that. You know what I mean? All right, so let's kind of get into this before we get too in the weeds or like into other things. So, David James Pelzer is his name. He's going by Dave on the book, so that's what I'm going to call him. So, he was born in 1960 in San Francisco, and he was the second of 5 sons. His dad's name was Stephen. His dad was a firefighter in San Francisco. And his mom, whose name was Catherine, who is the villain of the piece, was a homemaker, I guess. They never say that she had a job or anything like that. So they actually lived in Daly City, which is kind of a nice middle class, just regular suburb, not far from San Francisco. Now, Dave says in his memoir, A Child Called It, which again came out in 1995. So he's remembering stuff that happened in the 60s and 70s to him. And he says for the first 4 or 5 years of his life, his childhood was pretty idyllic. Like family life was totally normal. They lived just a nice, normal, suburban, middle class lifestyle. You know what I mean? They went on picnics and shit, like went on trips to Golden Gate Park and had Christmas and everything like that. Like I said, just a normal ass kid. And he described it in his book as this was like the Brady Bunch ideal. So he doesn't remember anything bad happening prior to him being 4 or 5 years old. But then he says around the time that he went into kindergarten, so that would be, about 4 or 5 years old, I guess 6 if it was first grade. So this is mid to late 1960s we're talking about. His mom's behavior changed for reasons which are still pretty unclear. If indeed her behavior is the way it's described, it kind of sounds like maybe not a psychotic break necessarily, but she might have developed some kind of mental illness, whether it was depression or bipolar disorder or something like that. It kind of sounds like something bad happened to her. You know what I mean? Like, because evidently from his account, like it sounds like it came on kind of sudden. So her behavior kind of started to change. She started drinking very heavily. I think she had drank a little bit before, but now she was like fucking chugging it like every day. You know what I mean? And right around this time period, like he would describe how like this sounds kind of bipolar-y to me, like where she started, like some days she would just get up and like just not get dressed. She would just lay around in her bathrobe all day and just like lay on the couch and watch TV. But then some days she'd be fine and she'd get up and do her hair and dress all pretty and be all pleasant and everything like that. And he said after a while you kind of knew that if she just didn't get out of her bathrobe, then you knew you were in trouble. You know what I mean? Because she was going to be like a fucking nightmare that day. So to me, that sounds like some kind of mental health issue she was having. And like I said, I don't think the drinking caused it. I think the drinking was like a symptom. She was using that to.
Sounds just like depression.
That's what I was saying. It kind of sounds like depression to me.
She married? No. She's married?
Yeah. Her husband's a firefighter, like I said.
Yeah. Evidently, she's not getting enough. It's not getting enough dick. It's not an exciting life, dealing with children,
Yeah, and
she's like,
eventually they
fuck
had
this.
5 kids,
Yeah,
so
she fuck this. That's
which
what.
I can understand getting
Yeah,
depressed about that.
some women need a break from being a mom. You know, I
I
think
feel like pretty every woman needs
needs
that.
a break from being a mom. She's not getting a
Because
break.
it's a lot of work and
Yeah,
a lot of stress, and it's
yeah.
like, I don't have kids myself, but it's just like I can't. Then that's really one of the reasons I didn't want any, because I knew that it would just be like so fucking
Yeah.
stressful. Because it's
If
like, look, I'm stressed out enough without
I was running
children.
for a job, I would
Jesus
make. If
Christ.
I was running for a job, if I was running for a political job, I would make that one of my main things. Is that if you're gonna raise kids, you're gonna get paid. That's a job.
Well, yeah, it's a 24/7
Yeah,
job. You don't
that's a
get to
job.
go home at the end of the day. You're already home.
Yeah, and it's beneficial to society because if you don't have kids, you don't have a country. You know what I mean? Fucking there goes your economy because they buy things, they work, they do other shit. You know, fucking you need an expanding market, so women should be paid for that
Well, yeah, I agree. Because
because they
like I
don't pay
said,
the husband enough to fucking cover everything.
yeah.
So you know,
And like I said, if you had to hire somebody to do what a stay-at-home mom or stay-at-home wife
it
does,
costs a lot of
like it
money.
would cost a lot of
Yeah,
money. Like if you had to hire a maid and a nanny and
yeah,
all that other kind of crap, like Jesus Christ,
yeah.
you'd be paying out the
The
nose.
Soviets would give women medals for having kids.
What good's a medal gonna do? Give me
What's
some
that?
cash, baby.
No, they were just giving them status. You know what I mean? You raised 5 boys for the empire. You know,
I mean, that's a little weird, but yeah.
why not? They were
So
on welfare,
yeah.
so they were working for the state.
Okay, so whatever it was that caused the mom's issues, allegedly, and like I said, the drinking just exacerbated whatever it was. Now, interestingly, I don't know. I don't know enough about child abuse to say this, to say what the percentage is. One of the things that people criticized this about was that Dave always said that he was the only one of his eventual 5 siblings. He was one of 5 siblings. But he said that the other 4 brothers were not abused, and that he was particularly singled out by his mother. Um I kind of feel like abusive households, you kind of hear about more like the tendency is for the parents to abuse all the kids. But it's not unheard of or all that unusual for one kid to be singled out. You know what I mean? And again, I was kind of reminded a little bit of the Sylvia Likens thing, which wasn't exactly the same dynamic because that wasn't her mom. But she had her own kids. That Gertrude, that crazy bitch, Banashevsky, I think her last name was. And she had her own kids and then all the neighbor kids, and she didn't really abuse them, just that one girl. And then her sister a little bit. And she used the other kids, like her own kids, like to also fuck with, which he says also is happening in this situation too. So starts getting singled out. Now, like I said, he had 4 brothers. I believe their names were Ronald, Stanley, Richard, and Kevin. I think Kevin was the youngest. He was like the baby. And I don't really think they were abused much, if at all. Now, keep in mind that this is 60s, 70s, and what we would call abuse nowadays, they probably wouldn't have called abuse back then, because I kind of feel like kids got smacked around a lot more and nobody thought much of it.
Yeah, discipline your children.
So they might have been getting like smacked around and shit, but not to the extent that people would call it abuse back then. You know what I mean?
Can't let these kids run wild like animals. Me and Jen were feral. We were feral though. We were free range children back in the 70s. All we had to do is be back before the fucking street lights came on.
Yeah, pretty much.
It was fun to be a kid back in the 70s. Hell yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, your parents didn't really know where you were, like all day, especially like during the summer and stuff like that.
They expected you to be out and
Yeah, just
fun.
go out and play.
Go have fun, play. Yeah, get the fuck out of here.
Although, like I said, in the summer in Florida, it's too fucking hot to go outside and play. So it's like, so we always just kind of stayed in our room and read books, or you'd go to your friend's house and like listen to records or something like that. We didn't want to run around outside because, like I said, it's like Satan's ass crack.
Shoot each other with BB guns and stuff.
Yeah, but you didn't grow up in Florida.
Yeah. No,
I did.
Mississippi. Mississippi. It's about as hot. It's not quite as hot, but almost.
So the thing about it too, it seems like, at least according to Dave's account, that his dad was a firefighter, so he worked a lot. Like he would work long Because sometimes don't they work like 24-hour shifts, like 24 hours on, 24 hours off, like that kind of stuff. So he wasn't really home a lot. And it seems like the worst shit happened when he wasn't there. But even when the dad was there, it seemed like he didn't really do anything to intervene. I'm not really sure how much of it like he saw actually happen with his own eyeballs, or if the mom was smart enough to like not do anything in front of him. I think a few things did happen in front of him, but he didn't really do anything about it. You know what I mean? Which is also kind of shady. So when he was going to elementary school, um, the abuse started getting worse and worse. And like I said, it was just him. It wasn't the brothers. So by the time he was in second, third grade, his mom would regularly starve him. That was a big thing that she did. She would also not wash his clothes and like force him to go to school in like the same clothes. So like after a while, obviously they stunk really bad, and like so he got bullied because he smelled.
That sounds fishy.
He was not allowed to sleep in a bed. They gave him a cot that was in a garage, or they'd make him sleep on the floor. Now, at school during this time, second, third grade, thereabouts, um, some teachers and administrators did notice that he had kind of bruises all over, that he was very thin, very underweight, and that he acted really weird. One thing that he did a lot was he would steal other kids' sandwiches out of their lunch boxes, and that was because his mom wasn't feeding him at home. Um, so they noticed, but like I said, it's, you know, it's late 60s, early 70s. They're like, well, that's weird, but it's not like nowadays where that would be like a huge red flag and they'd be like, holy crap, like call CPS, you know what I mean? Like, and rightfully so. But back then they were just kind of like, maybe something weird, but you know, we'll just like sit back and see what occurs, you know what I mean? So after like a couple of egregious incidents, which I'll get into in a minute, like in about 1971, um, the dad started like not like distancing himself from. I'm not even drinking alcohol and I can't fucking talk.
Yeah, you're not drinking tonight.
Yeah, I just have coffee. I have coffee. He just started kind of distancing himself. I get the feeling
Girlfriend.
I wasn't there, that he just didn't want to deal with it anymore. Like maybe he could see that his wife was losing her shit and he was just like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't want to be here. Like shit like that.
You got a girlfriend.
Well, he might have done that too, but I'm just saying that he probably just didn't want to be in the house anymore because probably it was like a toxic atmosphere, and so he just started spending more time away
with his girlfriend.
And
I guarantee you.
Yeah, well, like I said, it doesn't really matter.
Although one thing might have fed the other.
Well, that's exactly what I was just. That's what I was just saying.
Yeah.
So he started spending less time in the house, which Dave said was bad because most of the time, like his mom wouldn't fuck with him if his dad was there, because he always felt like kind of safer, like in his dad's presence. But since his dad wasn't coming around much anymore, then, you know, obviously she could kind of do what she wanted. He did say that the starvation got a lot worse. He said the worst period was she didn't feed him for like 10 days.
Oh, but damn. I don't know if I believe this shit.
Well, like, just wait. Okay. You know what I mean? I've only just started.
Okay.
You know what I mean? But like I said, it's not, none of this stuff, I've heard about this shit happening to other kids. You know what I mean? So it's not crazy. It's not crazy. So yeah. Now the dad left for good around the end of 1972. And so I guess like from that point, like, you know, the mom's control was just like, you know, she's a single mom now. She has 5 kids and she's just gonna run wild, I guess. One of her big things she liked to do was, you know, when he was younger, if he was bad, like she'd make him go sit, you know, stand in the corner, which a lot of parents would do that. But then after a while, she started developing this variation of that, which was called like the mirror treatment. And she would actually, instead of making him stand in the corner, she would make him stand in front of a mirror and just stare at himself for like hours. And and then like repeat like I'm a bad boy, I'm a bad boy, and then she would like push his face into the mirror and like kind of smear his face on the mirror kind of thing. Um Around this time also, he says she started referring to him not by his name, but she would call him it or the boy. Like that's all she called him. He wasn't allowed to eat with the family. At Christmas, he was not given any presents. The other brothers were, but he was not. And she would say, well, Santa Claus only brings presents for good boys, and you're a bad boy, so you don't get anything. So, like, she would, like, rub it in. I think the year before his dad left, his dad kind of went behind her back and got him a couple little
Mhm.
bullshit presents, and she got super, super pissed about that, like for undermining her
Was any of this
authority or
verified?
whatever.
We'll get into it later,
Well,
Bob.
yeah, like I said, we'll get
All
into it.
right,
I'm just
all
getting
right.
don't jump ahead of
See,
things.
Jen's the MC.
Well, yeah, well, like I said, I got whole I wrote all these
I
notes,
got,
and then you're just trying to like
I guess I'm going like it sounds
you're trying
fishy.
to like step on
All
my
right,
dick
I'm
and
gonna,
like
all right, all right.
you know, you can comment on stuff, but it's just kind of like don't jump ahead of shit because we're not even like a third of the way through yet.
Tell me what to do.
I'm just saying.
All right,
You know what I mean?
all right.
Um so yeah, so like obviously she would beat on him a lot, like I said, even teachers and stuff like noticed a bunch of bruises like on his arms and legs. One time in particular, this might have happened more than once, but I remember like reading one incident where she burned his arm like on a gas stove. I can't remember what, I mean, not like it matters, but I can't remember exactly what he did like to piss her off. Um but yeah, she like held his arm over the gas stove like when and burned it. Now, one of the most graphic and I guess kind of like frequently brought up episodes involves a kitchen knife. Now, according to this memoir, the mom, Catherine, who he said was pretty much always just, you know, as time went on, was just in a rage or drunk or both, um, she was yelling at him about something and she was waving the knife at him. And either the blade slipped or she deliberately stabbed him with it. Um, Either in his stomach or chest area. I think in the later books he said that it was in the chest, but it missed his heart by half an inch or something like that. And he goes on at quite a length. I think it's about 13 pages describing the stabbing and what it felt like and feeling all the blood coming out and just seeing kind of the yellowish white like the fat kind of coming out of the cut and stuff. And the mom, of course, um, since she allegedly just fucking stabbed her son, um, is not going to take him to the hospital, right? Because she's going to get in trouble. So she cleaned and bandaged the wound herself with gauze and then was like, "You're fine, go back and do your chores." That was another thing that he always had to just do all the chores around the house. His brothers didn't have to do jack, you know what I mean? But like when he came home from school, like she would be like, "Well, you have to do this, that, and the other thing." And then he just had to sit on the stairs and wait until she called him to do other things, you know what I mean? So he was like, you know, she was like a slave driver kind of. Um and basically she told him that if anybody asks you what happened to you, like vis-a-vis the stabbing, just tell them it was an accident. Um so yeah. Now, I think this had happened when his dad was still there. And I think this was one of the major incidents that kind of like spurred him to finally leave. Um, but I don't know. I don't think he saw it directly. I think he was just in another room or, you know, and he didn't really see what was going on. And like I said, the thing about his dad is that he did seem to be aware of some of the shit that was going on, but he didn't ever like intervene to stop it. Like he didn't ever, I don't know, like punch the mom in the face or tell her to knock it off or anything like that, as far as I'm aware. So, as I mentioned earlier, another very common thing that she would do, according to the memoir, was starvation. She wouldn't let him have any food. Like she kept food like in locked. She would lock like the fridge or the freezer or whatever or the cupboards, and he wouldn't be allowed to go in there. And then when the family would eat, they would make she would make him like stand over in the corner and just like watch them, but she wouldn't give him any food. And as I mentioned before, he said that he was denied food for 10 days. And he was very, very weak and dizzy, as you would be. And evidently, at the end of this 10 days, um, she gave him, like, this reminded me of Mommy Dearest, kind of. She gave him a plate of like cold leftovers. I'm not sure what it was exactly. It was just leftovers, and told him that he had 2 minutes to eat it. But then, like, so he's just like, he's super hungry. So he's just like, whatever. And he just starts stuffing it in his face. But then she, like, snatched it away from him, like, after he'd only taken a couple bites. Like, weren't quick enough or whatever the fuck. You know what I mean? Like I said, it reminded me of that Mommy Dearest thing where she put that raw steak in front of that little girl. And, like, she wouldn't eat it. And so she's like, well, you're going to sit there until you eat it. And so she's like, okay, well, I'm just going to sit here. Like, and it just became this, like, you know, war of attrition like between the two of them. You know what I mean? So apparently, because of this, he would steal food like sandwiches and stuff from like his classmates' lunch boxes, which he would also steal from grocery stores, would steal food from the cafeteria at school. Um, which he got in trouble for that at school a few times for stealing food. And when his mom found out about it, like, she would beat the shit out of him, um also, like, for stealing shit. But he was stealing shit, supposedly because she wasn't feeding him. Now this right here is pretty fucking gross. Just gonna say, a couple of these are pretty gross. So one thing, because she didn't want him to eat, I guess, is one thing that she would do is that sometimes he would come home from school and she wanted to make sure he hadn't stolen any food or eaten anything or whatever. So he would come home and she would make him throw up, like force him to vomit, like into the toilet or just on the floor or whatever. And then, he'd have to like stick his fingers down his throat. And then she would look and see if there was any food in there, like what he had stolen. And then a few times, she then told him to scoop the vomit up and eat it again. You know what I mean? Um, and evidently, during at least one of these incidents, the dad was there and saw this happen and didn't do or say anything. Um, so yeah, your mom making you eat your own vomit. I know it's like, you know, yeah, you just threw it up and you're just, I mean, but that's still pretty fucking gross, right? At least it's not somebody else's vomit. But, you know, but apparently, according to him, like in the book, he said this was because she was trying to control his caloric intake and also trying to dissuade him, I guess, from like stealing food, because he got in trouble for stealing food. And the reason he was stealing food allegedly was because she wasn't feeding him. But so when he would come home, she would make him throw up to see what he'd eaten that day, and then she would make him eat it. So, you know what I mean? So there's that. Um this is also pretty gross. I was listening to another podcast where he was reading like bits of the book, and this part stuck with me because it reminded me of that M. Night Shyamalan movie, The Visit. And if you've seen that movie, you probably know what scene I'm talking about because it's the grossest one by a long stretch. So on at least one occasion, when the dad and the brothers were not in the house, the mom apparently took a dirty diaper from Dave's little brother, who was a baby at the time, obviously. I think Kevin was the littlest one. Or no, or maybe Richard was the littlest one. I can't remember. And basically told Dave to eat the poop out of the diaper.
Sounds like that other
And
story.
that's what, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And he was like, hell no. I mean, unsurprisingly, I'd be
Yeah.
like, no thanks, I'll pass. You know what I mean? So when he said no, she slammed his face into the diaper and smeared the shit like all over his face and his mouth. And apparently he did this more than once. Like I said, this reminded me very much. And now I'm kind of wondering whoever wrote the screenplay for The Visit, that M. Night Shyamalan movie, I think M. Night Shyamalan probably wrote the screenplay. I wonder if he knew this story, like if he's read this book. Because something very much like that, like, happens in that movie too.
Yeah.
Um, and I was watching that movie, and I actually liked that movie way more than I thought I would, because I was like, because M. Night Shyamalan. Like, I did a review of it
Well,
over
it's
on my other
also
thing.
kind of like that real case, that girl they were kept in that damn basement and made
That's
meat out of.
that's what I mean. A lot of this
Yeah.
stuff was reminding me of Sylvia Likens, which is
Yeah,
why
Sylvia
I
Likens.
can't, in good conscience,
Yeah.
say that this dude's just making shit up. Because I was like, we did the Sylvia Likens case, and it's like, all that shit sounds crazy when you say it, but all that shit really happened.
That happened to her.
Yeah, that happened to her.
He may have just known about it and appropriated it. It's weird.
I mean, true, but it's just kind of like, yeah, like, there's no way of knowing. Like I said, I wasn't there. But yeah, having diaper poop smeared in your
Thank you,
face,
Kevin. Thank you,
that's got to be
probably
like one of the worst things I can think of. And I'm kind of almost because when I saw that in The Visit, and that's not even real because it's a movie, yeah, I was gagging big time. I was just like, oh, I can't even watch this because I knew what was gonna happen. As soon as he found the barn with all the shit diapers in it, I was just like, oh, that's gonna come back in the worst way. I just know it. And then, like, when that was leading up to that scene, I'm like, oh shit, do I even want to watch this? Ugh. You know what I mean? Ugh, it was so gross. I'm just kind of getting a little gaggy, like, thinking about it. But yeah. So another thing that she would do, or that she did at least one time, was she would force him to either swallow or inhale ammonia, like she would put like spoons of ammonia like under his nose, or like in his mouth or something like that. I think on one occasion she also locked him in an unventilated bathroom with a mixture of ammonia and Clorox, which obviously creates toxic fumes. Ooh, my brother almost, I remember this too. He was cleaning. What was he cleaning? I don't remember if he was cleaning his own house or like at a restaurant he worked at, and he accidentally mixed those two things together. Don't mix those two things together.
Chlorine gas.
Yeah, it's like it will kill you because and he was just like, it was immediate. He was just like, oh shit, like, and he had to like run out of the fucking, you know what I mean? But yeah, it will kill you if you. I've heard a couple people dying like that.
Yeah.
Where it's like, as if you don't know, or if you mix up bottles or something like that, if you mix those two things together, yeah, that can kill you.
What does it make? What did you say it was ammonia and chlorine?
Clorox, bleach.
Clorox, bleach. Yeah, bleach and ammonia.
Yeah.
I think it makes chlorine gas. I think.
That's what Zombie Burner says. Yeah.
Yeah. Which the thing is, though, is that the concentrations of the bleach and the chlorine that you get on the civilian market are not very high. A lot of that's water.
Yeah. So well, luckily.
Yeah, it's pretty. But if it's pure, oh yeah,
you're in big trouble.
Yeah, it'll release a fucking toxic cloud that you could see, and if that gets on you, it could kill you. It's just they try to use it as a chemical weapon in World War I, but it blows away too easily. It's real light gas, but if you're in an enclosed area, it'll kill you.
Yeah, and like I said, I think one of the criticisms that I saw of this was that, oh, if he was really in a bathroom with that mixed together, like, that would kill him.
Yeah.
But I'm like, one, I don't know how long he was in there. Two, he might have run out after a while. It doesn't necessarily kill you because, like I said, my brother mixed the two of them together, like, in an enclosed kitchen, and he lived.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
There was chlorine in, if it's pure. One of my mom's ex-boyfriends back in the very early '80s. His name was Russ. We lived with him for a while. It was before she got married, before we went to Brazil, and he was an executive at in an oil company where they were taking coke, which looks like damn big old pieces of coal, big old pieces of like coal. They were taking coke and they were turning it into some kind of, I don't know if it was some kind of an oil. I don't know how they do it, but this refinery, and part of this refinery, a bunch of these trucks would come up, and they were tanker trucks with big tanks, and they all had different things in them, and they had to clean out the inside of those tanker trucks with chlorine. Is one of the things that they used, and a dude showed up missing. A worker was missing, and they couldn't find him. They eventually found him, though. He was inside one of those tankers, dead. And what had happened is they cleaned out the inside of it using chlorine. He came around sometimes later and opened the hatch on the top of it to look in there for some reason, and the fumes fucking knocked him out instantly, and he fell down inside there and died
Yeah.
with all that shit in there. And he had been in there for
Chemical
hours.
warfare.
They
It's
were
no
looking
joke.
for him. They thought that he left the job, but no, he was just looking down inside a damn. He's probably looking in there to see if it had been cleaned.
Yeah, he's probably like, hey, I'm gonna
And
check
just
on
the
this.
vapors hit him, pure chlorine. And it's not civilian chlorine, it was fucking industrial chlorine.
Man, what a fucking shitty ass way to go. You're just
Yeah.
at your damn job doing your regular
Doing your own job,
doing
yeah.
your regular job shit.
He didn't know it hit him, though.
Yeah, I mean, you know.
He opened that hatch and looked in there like that, and the fumes got him probably one whiff and fucking instantly unconscious and fell down in there.
Yeah.
And then, a few breaths later, he was dead.
Yikes.
Yeah. So I was like 12 when that happened. And he came back in and he told that story, and I got a healthy respect for chemicals after he told me that story.
Ever since my brother told me that at that time that he was cleaning and accidentally mixed those two together, like I've been like really paranoid about like fucking making sure all the labels are like bottles are labeled and shit.
It's hard to make it of a high enough concentration to
yeah,
kill.
but it's like it'd be super unpleasant.
It'd be unpleasant, and it could burn your fucking lungs and your nose.
Like so, burned. Even if you didn't die, you still don't want to do it.
You don't want to do it.
You know what I mean? Just pro tip.
And who knows what that does to you long term? Might burn your nose and your lungs.
Yeah, you never know.
And for all you know, 20 years later, you got cancer.
Yeah, it's like it might scar your lungs all up.
You don't know
shit
what
like
happened,
that.
right?
Grampler says, my mom, who passed 4 years ago, dealt with profound mental health issues at times when I was growing up, but was never physically abusive, thank God. Yeah, it's just kind of like, that's why I'm always really hesitant to like kind of call bullshit on people's child abuse stories, because it's like, I wouldn't know, like, I didn't experience it. So, I don't know how a child abuse, like, person that went through that kind of trauma would act when they were an adult, you know what I mean? So it's like, I'm not going to sit here and like Monday morning quarterback like how children that went through trauma like should act or should be or the right way to do it or something like that. So, because I don't, I didn't experience it myself. So, who am I to like say that their experience isn't right or whatever. CB says the brothers are assholes for not telling teachers or the police, and the dad is an asshole too for not stopping it. I agree. The brothers were just kids. However, just as in the Sylvia Likens case, I know we keep comparing it to that. The brothers, I think the mom kind of sometimes deputized them to pick on Dave as well, as a way of like scapegoating him. And it could be that maybe if some of them saw what was happening to him and were like, oh, well, I don't want that to happen to me, so I better do what she says. You know what I mean? So that might have been out of fear. So there might have been that too. But for the dad, there was absolutely no excuse. The dad absolutely should have intervened. And the fact that he just kind of sat there, passively and evidently watched some of this shit happen. Although, like I said, I think he did say in the book that most of the worst shit happened like when dad wasn't home, like when he was at work or after he had left. Because I think he was maybe the only thing keeping her from just going full on psycho, you know what I mean? But according to him, he did see a few things that he should have intervened to stop. You know what I mean? But yeah, so the kid, I mean, he was basically treated as a pariah, was never called by his name. He was just, like I say, he was essentially like a slave in his own home. Like they just kind of threw him on a cot in the garage and just made him clean and work and wouldn't feed him and all this other kind of shit. So pretty horrible, if true. Now, I feel like most of the time they were able to portray normalcy to those outside. However, eventually, it kind of added up to the point where someone did intervene. So that's what I'm saying. So the intervention happened in 1973. And the fact that, and like I said, I feel like beating on your kids in the 60s and 70s, maybe the 50s too, was a lot more normalized. Like not like full on. Well, even that, like I kind of feel like people were, or I don't know if it was normalized, it just wasn't seen as that big of a deal. You know what I mean? And I kind of remember it being not that big of a deal, like getting the shit beat out of you. I never did, but I knew some kids that did, and everyone
Yeah,
was just kind of like, "Oh, yeah, well, should have done it."
boomers thought you were supposed to use force against kids,
Yeah,
especially teenagers, because they felt that they thought you were getting out of line, and their version of what out of line was, then they,
yeah,
it was kind of bullshit. They'd fucking get physical with your ass.
yeah. I mean, boomers had so many
Yeah,
unresolved issues.
yeah, it's because of the way their parents treated them.
Yeah, I mean, they were probably treated horribly,
Yeah,
also, and they were just repeating the cycle.
yeah.
But I'm
Well, they
just
thought it was
saying,
normal.
yeah, and so that's what I'm saying. So I'm saying that one of the things that kind of pushes me more toward at least believing part of his account
Yeah,
is that unless it was bad in
yeah,
1973, I feel like they wouldn't, because they had other kids. She had other kids. She had 4 other kids, and they didn't take them all away.
yeah.
Just him.
You could ask Grampers. We went to high school together for a certain amount of time. He's an ex-cop. I'm an ex-soldier. Your parents wanted you to conform, and they wanted you to be just like them. They wanted you to like the same fucking music. They wanted you to dress like them and think like them. They didn't. Which is crazy because they didn't dress or think anything like their parents, but for some reason they wanted you to conform to their standards.
Yeah.
And if you did what they wanted you to do, you'd been a fucking dork at school. What are you talking about? The
Well,
kind of
yeah.
school. There was an insult we had back in the day. How your parents dress you.
Well, yeah.
You could tell whose fucking parents dressed them. It's like, man, that's like some shit from the '60s. Nerdy shit from the '60s. You're wearing slacks to high school.
Where's
Fucking
those nice slacks I bought
yeah,
you?
who wears fucking
From
slacks?
Sears.
Yeah, who wears fucking slacks to high school? They
Nerds.
just so there was a lot of that going on. They didn't like you listening to music. Fucking any heavy metal and shit. I told my stepdad came in and tore my fucking Judas Priest fucking these faggots, get these faggots off your fucking wall, tearing down my Judas Priest posters. Yeah.
Yeah, for real, my grandpa,
like, what the fuck?
my dad was actually pretty cool because he was really
Yeah.
into music also. But my grandfather was just, man, he
Yeah.
thought all the music I listened to, they're all gay.
Yeah, all these faggots.
They're all gay and they're
Yeah.
all on drugs.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure most of them were on drugs. Okay, it was the 80s, but
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
Everybody
call
was.
Duran Duran gay, you'd be highly mistaken. They were pretty
That's
boys.
yeah, that was one of the bands that he used to, and I'm just like,
those dudes were
no.
fucking swimming in supermodels.
Boy George, okay, yeah, but
Yeah.
like, all right, but we
Yeah.
didn't care though.
Yeah.
But they sure did. They got their
Yeah.
panties all in a twist.
My
about
stepdad
it.
came in and fucking tore down a poster of KK Downing and said, get this faggot off here. I said, no, not him, the other one.
That one's not gay.
No,
that guy is.
that was not gay, the other one. Fucking Rob. Yeah, Rob.
You got your gays all mixed up.
Yeah, right. But it was just fucking stupid. They
Yeah,
didn't
like-
have any kind of sense of humor. They took everything real seriously. That's devil shit. Nah, they're just selling records.
I mean, yeah, they were like
Yeah.
that whole fucking satanic panic thing.
yeah.
And actually, since we mentioned satanic panic, I
Yeah.
kind of feel like another book that along these same lines but a little more egregious kind of kicked off the satanic panic a little bit, or was instrumental in it, which is called Michelle Remembers. We did a couple shows about satanic panic, and Michelle Remembers was one of those. Remember how there was in the 80s there was this kind of trend for recovered memories.
Yeah.
And somehow, like, all of these recovered memories were all of like, oh, my parents were Satanists and impregnated all these girls and then sacrificed the babies. Like, and it happened like hundreds of times, but there's like no evidence of it anywhere. But I feel like Michelle Remembers was kind of one of the main books. And that was one of the things that like I said, that's way more unbelievable than this book is, like by quite a large margin. But I don't know. I kind of feel like that is just like a very boomery thing. Like worrying about, your hair being too long, or like,
what color your clothes were.
What color your clothes were, or
Yeah.
like, a boy has an earring, or like
Yeah,
they made a big fucking deal out of everything.
I saw an explanation of that. A dude that was older than me was talking about growing up with. He was a very early Generation X, and he said that he goes, yeah, going to high school, my parents always cared about what color fucking clothes I was wearing. And fucking they were always worried. They always thought things meant things. Like
Yeah.
if you wore black, then that meant you were a fucking criminal. if you wore yellow, then you were gay. If you were, and all that shit was true back in parts of the 50s and the 60s because they were so kind of fucking restricted in what they could do. They had an underground code. So in high school in the 50s and shit, gays on Tuesday would wear yellow. Shit like that. Guys that were fucking like hoods, like some out of Greece, they wore black. Black fucking today in the time today and even in the time when I was going to high school, black was just a cool color. It was neutral. It didn't have any meaning at all. It was just mysterious. You know. Fucking and if you were in the hood, red meant you were a fucking blood. If you were wearing blue, you were a Crip. This is all fucking gang affiliations and shit. So if you wanted to be safe, you were black. Because nobody claimed that one. So but
well,
you
it
see,
goes
boomers
with
didn't know
everything,
any of
and
that
it's
shit.
very slimming.
But yeah, black looks best. Black's a serious color. Black and gray. And white. Yeah. Those are the goth colors.
I can't wear
red
white,
sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, goths can wear lots of colors as long as it's mostly black. I kind of like combos of like, well, look at my cramp shirt today is black and pink, so
Yeah.
I have a black and red one too.
But boomers thought things meant things and it meant important things.
Yeah, whereas like most of the time, sometimes it would kind of mean something, but just like, man, it wasn't really
Yeah.
that big of a deal.
They were very low information. They were very low information generation. No internet, no nothing. So they were just. Nowadays, you look back on them and go, yeah, it's like something out of fucking old school China or Korea. Is kind of the way they were. Weird.
Yeah, so
stunted.
Yeah, and like I said, it didn't help, raising their kids. Like I said, beating the crap out of them. But that's kind of what I was saying is that because that was so normalized, beating the crap out of your kids and husbands smacking the shit out of their wives, I feel like that wasn't even that big of a deal back then either, sadly. But so I feel like for someone to have intervened and taken this kid away from the family, from the mom, there had to be at least something going on. So, as far as I know, this is documented in the state of California that March 5th, 1973, Dave was then about 11, 12 years old, and he was in 5th grade at Thomas Edison Elementary School in Daly City. And because the staff there had noticed, like the school nurse had noticed, and also the principal and a couple of teachers that he was kind of close to, they kind of got together and said, yeah, I think this kid's probably being abused at home. They had seen, the bruising and, over a couple of years and, the weight loss and his stealing and things like stealing food and things like that. So they finally like intervened and called the authorities. So apparently a cop showed up and took Dave out of school and put him in the juvenile system in San Mateo County. And as far as I know, after he was taken from his house, I don't think he ever had any further contact with his mother, as far as I'm aware. Like, I don't know if he might have had like contact with her, like maybe she came back and said, oh, she trying to get him back and shit like that, but I don't think he ever went back to his house or anything like that. Now, there was, as far as I'm aware, there was documentation saying that this was one of the more severe abuse cases on record. One thing I saw though, and I'm not really sure if I believe this, and I was like watching another podcast where they kind of pointed this out, where it kind of came out that someone somewhere had said that this was like the third worst documented case. Like the first two kids had died, from the abuse, and so this is the third worst one. I was just kind of like, well, I kind of feel like third. I feel like more kids died from child abuse than that. So if the criteria of like worst child abuse is that the kid died, then just two of them dying and him still being alive. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like because there was a lot more kids that died from child abuse than just two. You know what I mean, in California. So even back then. So I don't know. I don't really know where that came from, but that's something that gets like repeated a lot, like third worst or whatever. But there is documentation saying that it was like a pretty severe case. So he was placed into the foster system, which he moved through a couple of families, but he seemed to have had a pretty decent experience like in the foster system. He didn't, as far as I know, like end up in any other abusive households or anything like that. Everyone was pretty cool. So in 1979, when he was 18 years old, he enlisted in the Air Force. I believe he was also a firefighter of one, just like his dad was. Um, and I think later, in the 90s, like was in some Gulf War situations, you know what I mean? Now, he married, I believe his first wife's name was Patsy. I forgot to write it down. He had a son whose name was Steven, and he divorced her and later remarried. Now, I should note that his first wife, Patsy, I believe, at least according to the New York Times article, um, thought that the book was made up, but she was not there. Like, you know what I mean? He met her later. So I don't really know. Now, his mom actually died in 1992. His dad had died much earlier, like in 1980, he died of lung cancer. Now, neither one of the parents faced any criminal charges related to the abuse. I mean, not unusual for the time, I guess. The Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act was actually passed by Congress in 1974, which was the year after that Dave was removed from his house. Um, and I kind of think, I don't think it was just his case because it was just like one case out of a bunch. But I feel like there had been some kind of momentum where child abuse was finally starting to get taken a little bit more seriously. So in 1995, he published his book, A Child Called It. And the book really became kind of a phenomenon, really, at least in self help circles. He wrote sequels in 1997 that was called The Lost Boy, and one in 1999, which was called A Man Called Dave. And he kind of went on to, as a career as a lecturer, and he would, like a, motivational speaker. He talked about personal responsibility, resilience, child abuse awareness, that kind of stuff. Um, he seems to turn up like on a lot of Christiany stuff. So I'm assuming
Well,
he's
they're into
also
that
like
shit.
on that circuit. At least what I saw. He was on Oprah. He was on Montel Williams. This is how big a deal he was. I didn't even remember this, but in 1996, he carried the Olympic torch. Like he was one of the people in the thing. Like so, he had to be something of a big deal. And like I said, he's continued writing self help and motivational works, and has written 4 books after those 3. So The Lost Boy, which was the second book in the series after A Child Called It, um, picks up right after he was removed from his family's house in 1973, and talks about his time in the foster care system, like temporary placements, um, how he acted out quite a bit, like in his, again, not surprising, like in his teenage years, setting fires, stealing, that kind of shit, and was in and out of juvenile detention a little bit. Had a hard time trusting adults, again, probably not surprising. Um, but he finally kind of settled down a little bit, and he talks in particular about one foster family. I think they were called the Turnbows, um, who he really kind of helped him out a lot. Um, I think I don't know if he finished high school, but he did go back and get a GED later on. And like I said, he joined the Air Force when he was 18. And then his third book, which came out in 1999, was called A Man Called Dave. That kind of focuses on adulthood, and talks about his marriage and his having a kid, and kind of his efforts to sort of reconcile his past and all this other kind of shit. Now, I will note that critics have noted that he rehashes a lot of the stuff from the first book in the other 2 books. And in some cases, the details are slightly different or slightly exaggerated. So that's something that a lot of people have pointed to as saying, oh, well, he must have just made up the whole first book because he's still kind of milking the same information in these 2 other books, which are about different shit, like about different, times in his life. But he does revisit a lot, like big chunks of the first book, and sometimes the details are slightly different, which, like I said, could be, which could be a testament to him just like making shit up and forgetting what he said in the first book. Or it could just be the older you get, like the more fucked up your memory gets and you're not remembering it right. I don't really know. But that's something that like a lot of people have.
Well, he had a hit with his first book. He's gonna fucking make more books.
Well, yeah,
He'll
and
make money.
yeah, and a lot of people said that too. It's just kind of like,
Yeah.
well, that was what sold the first book was
Yeah.
like the trauma and horror and everything. If you're just gonna do a book where it's like, oh, everything's okay now, nobody wants to read that, you know.
Yeah, this shit ain't gonna sell.
Well, it's just, you know what I mean. You can't really. I feel like everyone is kind of to blame in this because people that write these types of books, you know, even somebody that just makes them up out of whole cloth, which I don't think this dude did, but some people do. In a way, you can blame them, one, because they're making shit up and that's not right. Two, they're also making it harder to believe like people who actually had shit like this happen to them because it's like a boy who cried wolf situation.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the audience is kind of to blame too because it's like if this shit didn't sell, they wouldn't publish it.
All you gotta do is look at Christian movies. Christians will make a movie that bitch a flop because they're trying to fucking put all kinds of high-minded Christian values and morals in the fucking movie. All right? Nobody wants to see that shit. But then Mel Gibson comes along and makes Passion of the Christ, which is just fucking Jesus torture porn.
That's exactly
And,
what that
and it
movie
fucking
is.
sells through the fucking roof.
Yeah, pretty
there's
much.
a couple little interludes of him about making chairs and shit like that. But no, he
Jesus making
he
chairs.
gave Christians what they wanted to see. They just wanted to see the fucking Jesus getting tortured on a damn cross, and
Because like really,
it's a good movie. It's a good Christian.
really, the Christians deep down, they
Yeah.
wanted to watch Saw or Hostel or
Yeah,
something like, but they
yeah.
couldn't in good conscience.
Yeah.
So it's like, so here's a torture porn movie that you can watch because it's morally uplifting.
Yeah, and then that makes them,
That's exactly what it is.
that they can draw parallels between Christ's suffering and their suffering.
Yeah.
Oh man, Christ, his shit was even worse. You know,
So what am I? bitching
Gibson
about?
knew exactly what he was doing. Exactly what he was doing, and we fucking shit on Christian movies because most of them fucking suck.
Yeah,
but there are
99%
good ones.
of them are terrible.
The Exorcist is a great Christian movie. That is a Christian movie.
Yeah.
Whether Christians made it or not. Passion of the Christ. Noah. That's a Jewish movie though too.
Yeah, that's kind of
Noah.
more like an Old Testament.
It's Old Testament, but Christians. Now, some Christians didn't like it, but that's what the
It's
Jubilees.
like that's what was in there.
That's what's in Jubilees. It's not
They
in
make nothing
Genesis too much, but in Jubilees is that the extra canonical, the bonus material that only the priests were supposed to read. Yeah, and then the one that the fucking man, that one Christian horror movie where the dude Frailty. Yeah, that was a good one. Killing demons.
Because that's the thing, because it's not really sold as a Christian horror movie.
No.
And they're not really trying to convert anybody or anything. Like they're just making a story and it just happens to be and it's just like a what if kind of story.
What if?
Which you can absolutely make Christian movies like that, but the problem is that 99% of Christian media, whether it's music or movies or whatever, isn't that. They're trying to push an agenda.
Yeah.
Frailty was not trying to push an agenda. It was just a story about
a dude killing demons.
That they thought he was just this crazy religious nut, but it turned out that he was right, that the demons were real.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, I'm an atheist and I could have come up with that. I was just like, just for shits and giggles, what if, you know what I mean?
It turns out
that he's right.
Yeah, you're crazy.
You know?
You're crazy.
And like I said, but the movie wasn't trying to, it was just a good movie and it was just like a good horror movie. It just happened to have that theme to it.
Bill Paxton, the dude from fucking Aliens, the dude.
He directed it too.
He directed it, yeah.
But
he's Christian. So it's a Christian movie.
Yeah.
Really good. Really
Which,
good.
like I said, I don't have an issue with that.
No.
It's just that a lot of them are just not good because they're trying to push an agenda more than just telling a story.
The whole Omen series, with all the way up to Omen to the Final Conflict, good Christian movies. Even though Christians didn't make it, it didn't matter. I think a lot of Christians liked that movie. Fucking the Omen, fucking the Antichrist. Yeah, hell yeah. She was spooky, man.
Zombie Burner says the first Saw film was pretty good. The sequels kind of got into the weeds, though. Yeah, I agree with you. I actually really liked the first Saw film. I think I saw it in the theater, if I'm remembering correctly. I think I saw the second one, and I was like, yeah, that one's okay, but I didn't really bother with the other ones. Same with Hostel. I actually saw the first Hostel in the theater also, and I was like, oh yeah, that's pretty fucked up. And it's not the most fucked up thing I've ever seen, but it was pretty fucked up. But I didn't bother with the other ones because I was like, well, I've seen that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Gramther says The Wrestler was a Christian movie. Yeah, I guess it was. Man, that was a great movie too.
Which one was
It's not a
that?
horror movie. You didn't see it. It
I didn't
was
see it.
Mickey Rourke.
Yeah. Okay.
We should probably review it one of these days
Oh,
because
yeah,
you
yeah.
probably really like it.
I've seen clips from it. It looked like a good
Yeah,
movie.
it's great.
Yeah,
I think
Zombie knows about frailty. Yeah, that's one of my favorite Christian movies. And I have a special Christian selection. Even though I'm a Christian mythicist, I don't believe any of that shit's true, but I like the mythology. I grew up with it. I'm a cultural Christian, but I don't believe it's actually true. But it is kind of cool. The stories are very cool. I want a fucking story about Revelation. All right, but it's got to be just like out of the books with the seven seals opening up, and the beast with the seven heads and the fucking all that shit. Seven horns.
be better if an atheist made it.
Yeah, because a Christian was gonna would try to read too much into it, make his interpretation. No, it's got to be just right out of that fucking book.
Yeah,
And with CG, and it's gonna be like it's not like a Godzilla movie. So it can.
I'd watch that.
Yeah, stars falling from the sky. Think of that. They thought stars could fall from the sky and be small enough to land on the ground. You could pick one up like a little light. That's what they thought. And it would kill a certain percentage of the fucking fish in the ocean. And yeah, I wanted to see all that just right out of Revelation.
It just occurred to me. Yeah, Gramter said so was The Apostle. Yeah, that's right. That was also a Christian
I
movie.
didn't see that one.
I can't. Oh shit! What was the name of this one? I reviewed this one. Revealer.
Yeah.
There was a movie called Revealer, which was like an indie horror movie, very low budget, and it was essentially about a girl who was a stripper. She worked in a peep booth, and she gets trapped in her peep booth, like the door sticks, and her nemesis is like this super uber Christian girl that like protests in front of the strip club all the time. And it turns out that like when this girl gets trapped in the peep booth, the end of the world starts to happen outside, like the Christian end of the world.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
And like the Christian girl has to, who then these two hate each other. She comes and hides in the strip club because like all the stars are falling from the sky and all that kind of shit.
Yeah.
And they don't really show a lot of it because it's low budget.
I gotta see this.
So it's I reviewed it a long time ago. It might still be on Shudder. I'm not sure. But it was super fun. It's mostly like a character piece with just like the two girls. But they're just kind of like describing what's happened outside because they couldn't really afford to show it. But technically, if you're gonna say a Christian movie is anything that purports that shit that happened in the Bible is actually true, then this would be a Christian movie because they're purporting, the end of the world happens just like it happened in the Bible.
Another good Christian movie that was overlooked. We saw it in the fucking theater was X. It's called Heretic.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a really good Christian horror movie. What's that guy's name? That good dude that played the heretic?
Hugh
Grant.
Grant, yeah.
Yeah, man, that was a good movie. And it's about two Mormon girls go to this dude's house to try to make him a Mormon, and it turns out he knows everything about all these different religions, but he's a heretic. Oh man, it is. And his house is like a house. It's like a maze. It's a house of horrors, and I don't want to spoil it if you haven't seen the movie. Just go see.
We've seen it a couple of times. We saw it in the theater, and then it's on Hulu. I think it's on Hulu or.
I want to own it on Blu-ray. I haven't had a chance to go back and buy it because I want to buy the Primal series on Blu-ray next. All three of them bitches. I got to own them But Heretic was one of the ones I wanted to own. I like that movie.
I loved that movie.
Great movie.
It was so good.
Great movie.
It was even better the second time I watched it.
Yeah. There's more shit in it that I saw, and there's. Christians, if you're a Christian, you need to see that movie.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that specifically a Christian movie.
It's just a horror movie, but Christianity is the topic.
It's the topic,
religion.
and it doesn't come down one way or the other
No.
on which one's right or
whatever.
and
And the Mormon girls are kind of the heroes in the story. They don't goof on them or anything. It's a war between religious ideology.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild, man.
Gramthers gave us a super chat. He says, "Let me cover the Wrestler rental. Thank you very much." We should probably do that for.
Yeah, okay.
Because Gramthers, did you see? You were the one that recommended searching for Sugar Man.
We did,
right? We did that on Monday. If you didn't see it, which, like I said, you weren't here when we did it, and I was just kind of like, oh man, I wish you'd been here because I'm pretty sure you're the one that recommended it. And and I was like, man, that was so fucking good. And I was like, and I wanted to thank you for recommending it because I don't think I would have ever got around to seeing it otherwise because it wasn't like on my radar, but it was so good. But yeah, so go back and watch that review. We did it on Monday. Oh, okay, you did watch it. That's good. I was like, I just wanted to make sure you didn't miss it because I was like, yeah, we watched it. But yeah, okay. So let's see, where was I? So so I feel like in 1995, when his first book, A Child Called It, came out, I think it came out right at the right time where I feel like, obviously in the 70s and all throughout the 70s and 80s, there was like more like growing awareness of child abuse and things like that. But I kind of feel like this came out at like right when it was like hitting the crest of that wave, you know what I mean? And it was published by a pretty small, I think, like publishing house in Florida, which I think specialized in self-help books, so those kind of things, or like recovery kind of literature. Um, it kind of slowly started to build up an audience through like word of mouth, and like I said, he was on some talk shows and things like that. And it ended up like between like all three of the books, I guess, um, were on like the bestseller list for like years, really, like for a very long time, and sold well over 1 million copies in the US, and several million worldwide. I kind of feel like they sold a lot of them in the UK as well. Um and like I said, I feel like this one, even though there had been books like this prior, I feel like this was kind of the catalyst for the broader kind of misery lit boom, which came about like in the late 90s and early 2000s, where everybody was trying to like have like the abuse Olympics, where it's like see who could write the most fucked up shit like in a memoir, you know what I mean? And like I said, that's kind of shitty, but they wouldn't publish the shit if people didn't buy it. So I kind of feel like people that are the buying public is also responsible for buying it. If you didn't buy it, they wouldn't publish it. And if people are making money on it, then there's always going to be that subset of people that are just being like, well, I'm just going to make something up. You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't think this guy completely made stuff up. He might have exaggerated some shit. Um, but I know that there's some out there, maybe some that have not been discovered yet, that are probably entirely completely fictional. But that's the shitty thing is you can't really just go in and say, oh, they're all made up, because obviously some of them aren't. And you don't want to like shit on people that actually went through horrible shit and just say, oh, you just made all of it up, because a lot of times they didn't, you know what I mean? But some people do. So I kind of feel like that's shitty. It's another shitty reason like why you shouldn't make shit up like that, is because you're shitting on people that actually did go through that kind of stuff, and now no one's gonna believe them. You know what I mean? So so yeah, I feel like this book, it also kind of got picked up by social workers and educators and stuff like that, who would give it to survivors of child abuse, and a lot of them said that it had helped them like get through their own shit, and kind of spurred discussions about trauma and getting over it and things like that. And because Dave kind of went on the speaker circuit after that, like talking about motivational speaking and uh you know possibility of recovery, personal agency, things like that. Some people said that he really helped them, so that's something good, I guess. um Interestingly, because of how graphic this book was, some school libraries wouldn't stock it, you know what I mean, just because they didn't want the kids reading it. um and was actually one of the most challenged titles, according to the American Library Association, just because of, not because they thought it was bullshit, but just because it was pretty graphic. Now, so the controversies, which we'll get into uh at the right now, I kind of feel like there's several different categories of criticisms about the book. Mostly this one, but it kind of applies to all three of the books as well. And they kind of fall into, you know, other family members or something like that, like disputing how bad the abuse was, or, the details of it. Um, maybe some journalists like reading the books and finding like inconsistencies like between the books, things like that. Um, and then some of it is just kind of like broader criticisms of just the whole misery memoir genre as a whole. So as far as like familial stuff goes, now Dave's younger brother, Stephen, has publicly disputed the narrative. Um, he said that now I don't think he said that there was no abuse. He just said that it wasn't as intense as it was described. And he said that Dave wasn't removed from the home for abuse. He was removed from the home because he was shoplifting and started a fire.
So in other words, he was crazy.
Well, and I'm like, well, I don't know if they'd necessarily remove you from your house just for doing shit like
I
that.
think they're
But
saying that he went to juvie.
yeah, well, he did admit going to juvie, but
Yeah.
later, like after he was already
Yeah.
taken out of the house.
No, he's saying they took him out of his house because.
But he was just saying that was why. But he also said that Dave had been discharged from the Air Force on psychological grounds. However, this is not the case because you know his records are public, and he just had a regular ass
regular discharge.
Yeah. Now but this is kind of weird though, because when Steven said this, Dave responded that Steven had Bell's palsy and called him quote unquote semi-retarded. Now Bell's palsy is just like you can't move part of your face. It doesn't have anything to do with your brain or if you're dumb or anything like that. So the fact that he called his brother semi-retarded kind of gave me a little bit of a
Well, he might be saying he had two things wrong with him. He had
I mean,
palsy
maybe.
and he was semi-retarded.
Yeah, because Bell's palsy is not the same thing.
Yeah.
That's just like I said. It's just kind of you can't move.
Sounds like he's accusing him of two different things.
Maybe. He also said that Stephen had been protected by their mother and that he worshipped her. And that so he was just like sticking up for her kind of thing. And then, but I will note that his other brother, one of his other brothers, Richard, published a book called A Brother's Journey in 2005, which largely corroborated Dave's account. Because he says that after Dave got taken out of the house when he was 12, then Richard became the target for his mother's abuse. Because he said that when Dave was being abused, that he was afraid of their mom and was trying to like, you know, self-preservation or whatever. And so he would
hide.
Well, he would abuse Dave also, calling himself, you know, her little Nazi. That's what he called himself. And then after Dave got taken out of the house, he says that he was also beaten, humiliated, starved. His mom would make him drink Tabasco sauce, would make him go around in dirty clothes, other shit like that. So the same kind of stuff she was doing to Dave.
Could he be jumping on the fucking...
It's possible. That's what I mean. He could be corroborating the story and saying, yeah, that really happened the way he said. Or he could have just been seeing how successful Dave got off his... I mean, it could go either way, right?
Yeah.
You know, if there's no way of knowing. Now, the other brothers haven't really said anything about it one way or the other. Dave's grandmother came out and said that she thought some abuse had occurred, but not to the extreme level that was described in the book. And also kind of cast doubt on Richard's claims as well. But I will note that the grandmother did not live near them.
So grandma comes in and goes, yeah, there may have been some abuse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like I said, the grandma didn't live. She lived, I don't think it was a different state, but she lived like far away from them. So it's like, so she wasn't really there.
Yeah, but grandma didn't come in and go, this is all bullshit. They're making it up.
No.
Yeah. That's what
yeah, I think her story was, it's like, oh yeah, maybe they beat the kids, but it wasn't as bad as he said. But like I said, she could easily say that because she wasn't there.
She wasn't there, right.
You know what I mean? Like she didn't live with them.
She's saying it's plausible. That's all she's saying. Or
nothing like that. Yeah.
That's how I'm interpreting it. Yeah, it's plausible.
Yeah, and like I said, I've, you know, some of the shit that I described, like with being stabbed and the ammonia and the poop diaper and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, it sounds crazy, but it's like I've read about other child abuse cases, like I said, like the Sylvia Likens case, which are just as bad as that and had just crazy egregious stuff like that. So it's not like it doesn't happen, you know what I mean? Sadly, like you read about this kind of shit all the time. Like, could he have exaggerated it? Sure, but you know what I mean? Shit, don't say shit like this doesn't happen, because it does. Um, so another thing, I feel like a lot of people criticize, they're like, well, if all of this stuff was going on, why were there no criminal charges like brought against the mother? So it must have been exaggerated or whatever. But
Shit, they're
that's
rare.
that's what I mean. It's like even nowadays
Yeah.
when people are a lot more aware of it, like it's rare like to bring charges against it. And this was the early 1970s when this was happening.
Even more rare.
And I kind of feel
Yeah.
like CPS wasn't really much of a thing, or the system was a lot weaker back then. There was no mandatory reporting law like there is now.
Society was a lot different. They
Yeah.
expected fucking brutal discipline, basically.
So that's what I'm saying. So that's kind of one of the things that pushes me toward something bad must have been going on, because
Yeah.
even back in 1973, they felt the need to intervene and take him out of the house. And I feel like if he had just been shoplifting or doing shit like that, or I don't think that would have necessitated them taking him out of the house. You know what I mean? Maybe, but I don't know. I think they thought, at least as far as I could determine, it was several people at the school, like the principal and the nurse and everything like that, that finally got together and called the authorities. So there must have been something going on that they noticed. Um, so there was that. Now, remember I mentioned that New York Times Magazine article, which came out in 2002. And the article, if you want to read it, it's like I said, it's on the Wayback Machine and it's all there. It's about 9 pages. It's called Dysfunction for Dollars. Dysfunction for Dollars. And in that article, the author of the article, his name was Pat Jordan, kind of portrayed Dave at like pretty negatively, as kind of like a professional victim, and also leaned hard into the self promotion angle, like that he was just relentless in his self promotion, and um, he said that the guy, because he like met the guy or talked to the guy at like a convention or thing he was speaking at, and he said the guy is like super concerned about where his book is in the list rankings. That he does like tons and tons of speaking engagements, like 270 days a year, which, like I said, if that's his job, you know what I mean, yeah, they do that a lot. And also pointed out that he might have been bulk purchasing his own books and then reselling them at events, which isn't illegal. I mean, you can do that.
Me and Jenny have done that.
Yeah, like his isn't self-published. Yeah, you can buy your own books like
Yeah.
at a discount and then take 'em. I mean, I've done that, so
Yeah.
it's just, you know what I mean?
If you need to supply your own books, you got to buy them from the manufacturer.
Yeah,
They give you a discount.
but they're just kind of saying
Yeah.
that he might have bought so many that he bumped his numbers up to such an extent that it got him on the New York
That's
Times
the same.
bestseller
That's the
list.
same as selling them, though.
Yeah, I mean,
Because he doesn't have them in stock. He's fucking selling them.
well, I think they were arguing that he does keep a bunch of them in stock.
No, he wouldn't lock
But
up his own money like
but I
that.
don't know.
Because then you'd have a bunch of your fucking. You'd buy a bunch of your books and they'd be sitting there.
Yeah,
Where'd your money go? Well, it's locked
Right.
up in those books. If you want your money back, you're gonna sell the books. No, that didn't happen. No, he sold those books.
yeah. Well,
He would
like,
buy
like I
them and
said,
sell
it's not that weird
Yeah.
to buy books from your publisher at a discount, and then
Yeah.
if you're going to a convention or a speaking engagement, I feel like a lot of
They all do
authors
that.
do that.
Jenny's written books for parapsychologists, and they fucking have asked us for a fucking supply of them because we can get it to them at cost.
Yeah, because I just
Yeah,
get them for a
Because
few
we
dollars
get
a
them
piece.
for less. So and then we'll give them to him, and then he sells them.
Yeah, and they sell them for the
Sells
for the
them
list
with
price.
show price,
Yeah,
and it's gonna be an autographed copy. It's gonna be a little bit more because you're making profit. You have to, but that's what business is like. But no, he didn't buy millions of his own copies and just sit on them. Fuck no. He may have had a couple cases, but there might have been 20 books to a case.
yeah. I think they were more. I
That's
think
not
they
enough
were.
to make a difference.
I think they were more talking about like over the years, because his books were on the bestseller list for like years.
But that means hundreds of thousands of copies.
Yeah.
He's not sitting on those.
And I think the fact too that he was on a bunch of TV shows,
Yeah.
and people were buying it. Obviously.
What he's doing is
a lot of people were talking about.
He's
it.
going on fucking talk circuits and shows and selling them at the shows. That's what he's doing. They probably didn't have conventions back then like you do now. How much I bet whenever he went on those talk shows, he probably bought a couple cases of books with him.
Well, yeah, I would
He sold
imagine.
and did autographs.
Yeah, it's like just which,
Yeah.
like I said, that's not
what you do.
that's not nefarious.
No,
Like,
that's
everybody does that.
That's part of that gig. Me and Jen have done it.
Yeah. Um, Another thing that the article kind of called out was the magazine art author kind of thought that he thought it was fishy that Dave remembered the abusive incidents so well, like with crystal clarity, um, but seemed not to remember other details, like about his life, like at the time, like other shit that was going on. Um, and so he thought that was kind of fishy that he remembered it so well. I didn't think that was that fishy. I mean, like, if you had something that traumatic happen to you, like, yeah, you'd probably remember that more than just like mundane shit. Um, he also thought it was weird that he had been singled out, that the other brothers were not also abused. But like I said, yeah, I think while I think it is more common for abusive households or abusive parents to generally abuse all the kids, um, it's not unheard of for just one to get picked on. You know what I mean? So I don't think that's that unusual. I don't have any statistics on that, but I've heard of cases of that happening before. Um, and a couple of the things too that were like he was kind of weirded out by the stabbing because he's like, man, he spent 13 pages on that, like talking about the stabbing. And he's like, almost, he's kind of implying that it's like the way that he described it. He's like, you'd probably be dead. You know what I mean? And I saw like a couple of other podcasts talking about like the way he describes the stabbing. It's like, I don't think he could have lived through that. Some of the stuff that he described, but I don't know, like I said. And he did kind of say, I think he said at first that he got stabbed in the stomach or like somewhere in this area, like in the abdomen somewhere. And then I think like in a later account, like he maybe said the chest. So some people like, oh, detailed, where was it? You know what I mean? So I think that people were kind of skeptical about that. Um, so so I don't know. So I think people were kind of calling that out too because they thought he was maybe contradicting himself or he was like forgetting details. Um, so obviously, Dave just thought it was a hit piece and pointed out that it didn't detail like evidence from the teachers and uh the nurse and stuff at the school who had noticed signs of the abuse and had reported it. And like I said, he was removed from the house and there was abuse going on there. Um so I don't know. So I kind of feel like even if there were gaps or he remembered stuff incorrectly or like the time wasn't right or something like that, I don't think that necessarily you don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, because I for sure don't. I didn't even have an abusive childhood. I had a good childhood, but I don't remember most of the shit that happened back then. If you ask me, like, oh, how old were you when this happened, or where'd you live when this happened? I don't fucking know. I don't remember. You know what I mean? So, so it's like, yeah. I guess from my point of view too, I can see how it might be fishy that oh you can remember all this stuff that happened when you're a kid because I don't remember hardly anything that happened when I was a kid. Probably because it wasn't that traumatizing, you know what I mean? Like I didn't have any trauma or anything like that. Like I remember a couple things, but not, nothing that big. So, I mean, you could argue that because this was very traumatizing, like obviously you're going to remember it better than just having a boring, happy, normal childhood. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're not going to remember details. I mean, I certainly don't. Um, they also pointed out, which I thought this was kind of funny, but they pointed out in the New York Times article that Dave claimed for a while that the book had been nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Um, this is technically not true. And they said basically, if you want your book considered for a Pulitzer Prize, basically, I don't know how much it is now, but they're like back then, all you have to do is like fill out a form, send them $50 and like I think a copy of the book, and they'll take it into consideration. That doesn't mean you're gonna get nominated for it or anything like that. But he kind of apologized for that later because he said, "Oh yeah, I can see how that would be kind of deceptive that I would say that." He said, but the publisher said to say that it had been uh, nominated for a Pulitzer, even though it wasn't. He had sent it like submitted it for a Pulitzer, but it was not considered for a Pulitzer. It wasn't nominated. They only nominate like a handful of books or something like that out of all the ones that are submitted. But anybody can submit. And I think like even the podcast said it's like you could submit your fucking grocery list as long as you fill the form out and pay the fee. It's not going to win, obviously, but it's like then you can say, "Ooh, in consideration for a Pulitzer," which they're like, technically that's true, but if you're not going to get a Pulitzer, you know what I mean? It wasn't nominated. But he did actually clear that up later on. Although he did kind of mitigate it a little bit, saying, "Well, my publisher said to say that because it would sound really good, like for promotional purposes." You know what I mean? So, but that's kind of bullshit. Um, and like I said, I just kind of feel like the whole nature of memoir, especially ones that are about early childhood or early childhood trauma. I mean, that's inevitably going to involve some reconstruction. And like I said, I don't remember fucking 90% of what happened to me when I was a kid. Some people remember shit better, some people don't. Um, and people's memories, even at the best of times, are not super reliable. You think they are, but your brain essentially reconstructs a memory every time you remember it. Like you're not remembering it the way it actually happened. You're remembering
Your memory.
your memory of it the
Yeah.
last time you remembered it.
Yeah.
And so over time, that can change. That's nobody's fault. That's just how brains work. So I just kind of feel like any memoir, whatever it's about, is going to have that inherent flaw of maybe not happening the way you remembered it happening exactly. It's different if you have other corroborating witnesses saying it's like, oh yeah, I remember it like that too, or it was that's pretty close, but it was actually more like this or whatever, and then you can kind of like have a powwow and get together, like figure out what actually happened, kind of. But so I feel like that's not necessarily just a criticism of his book, but just this entire genre as a whole. And like I said, I feel like memoirs are kind of given a little bit of leeway in that regard just because of the way that people's memory works.
Somebody's mentioning "Mommy Dearest" by
Yeah.
Joan Crawford. Yeah. If you guys listen to our Johnny Carson show, which was unpopular, people are like, why are you doing this show about Johnny Carson? Because he was fucking
Because we
important.
felt like it.
He felt like it. He's an important fucking dude. He had a lot of information on the underground of Hollywood, what was going on behind the scenes. And one of the things that he said is when Joan Crawford's daughter came out with that book and was selling it, somebody asked Carson about it. He goes, "I don't doubt a single word of what that girl's saying," because he knew Crawford. She wasn't really welcome back on the Tonight Show.
Yeah, he didn't like her.
He didn't like her at all. And another one that fucking stuck with me is somebody mentioned who's that? Jerry Lewis, and he goes Jerry Lewis. He goes two things that how do you say it? That man shouldn't be around. That man should never be around a camera or a child. And I was just like, whoa, because he was raising money in front of a camera for children with these cancer,
Yeah.
I guess.
Well, didn't he do March of Dimes or
Yeah, I think it was cancer, wasn't it?
did he do March of Dimes? I can't remember.
But
I can't remember.
Yeah, two things that shouldn't ever be around that man is a camera or a child. Fucking, that was spooky. He wasn't welcome on the Tonight Show. And fucking Carson was a G, man.
Jerry Lewis always got on my nerves.
He was a G. What's that?
Jerry Lewis always got on my nerves.
Yeah. He could call him. He could tell you who was a good person, who was a bad person, who was going to make it, and who wasn't. If you were a stand-up comedian and fucking Johnny called you over to the couch after, that was it. That was worth millions of dollars. You were going to get all kinds of jobs because he was a kingmaker. Not a perfect man, but a good man. He was a good man. I liked Carson.
Yeah, Zombie Burner says the stabbing does seem like it should have killed a person, but I have seen people survive crazy shit. Yeah, that's what I mean. It's just like whether he remembered it right, like where the stabbing was exactly. People have survived being stabbed once, lots of times. Like I think people also. I mean, yeah, he was a kid, but I think people overestimate maybe from movies. Like they think you just stab a person one time and they just keel over dead. Like sometimes you have to stab a person like 20, 30 times before they die. You know what I mean? So depending on where you stab them. So I don't think, yes, it sounds crazy that like, my mom stabbed me and like didn't even take me to the hospital or anything like that. But people have lived through worse than that. So I wouldn't discount it out of hand. It could be exaggerated. Um, I think like I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was one of his brothers. The brother that said that he was exaggerating said that no, all that happened was like mom slipped and like cut his arm or something like that. I don't remember what he said, but he said it didn't happen the way he said, like it was an accident or something. But I don't know. Um, but yeah, so they're talking about the Christina Crawford. Yeah, Heido said I also read that most of the book was made up, but I haven't read it. I also haven't read Mommy Dearest, but I did see the movie, which inspired a million drag queens apparently. Yeah, no more wire hangers ever. Yeah, um, we did a show about Joan Crawford. It wasn't just about her; it was her and Betty Davis, because they had the big feud and everything. And I think Mommy Dearest was probably exaggerated somewhat, or maybe Christina Crawford's. I think it was kind of maybe the same situation as this, where it's like it probably wasn't as quite as crazy because obviously, like I said, people want over the top, people want egregious, people want violence. They want, people are just like that. Um, so if you can exaggerate something to make it seem like it was worse than it was, then you're gonna do it. Like especially in a movie. So I feel like the movie was probably exaggerated, but you know, uh, knowing the little bit that I know about Joan Crawford, yeah, I could see her doing some of that shit. You know what I mean? I could see her doing that
Joan
some shit.
Crawford was the original fucking power woman. She fucking was very powerful in Hollywood, and she had a lot to lose. She was a self-made woman. If she lost a job or her career slipped, that was the end of her and her fucking lifestyle. She had a nice fucking house there in fucking in California, and she was just trying to keep herself relevant as an older woman in a Hollywood filled with young up and coming women. You know what I mean? She had to, and she was under a lot of stress, and I think she took it out on the kids.
Yeah,
And she spent a lot of her time single. You know, she wasn't the kind of woman that would just marry up with some dude and retire. She wasn't like that. Sexy woman. She looked good, but nah, she'd be trouble. That one.
probably.
Yeah, attitude.
Heidegger said, I think it was Christina's siblings who claimed she exaggerated stuff. Yeah, I think like her brother. But then I guess you could kind of come back and say, well, even if she did exaggerate stuff, I don't think the brother was targeted much like in this situation where it was just like one kid that was targeted. I think she did do some stuff to the boy, but it wasn't really framed. I mean, he didn't write the book, right? So obviously, if Christina is writing about what happened to her, whether she exaggerated or not, then she's just gonna talk about what happened to her and not so much about what happened to the other. But I don't think like the boy was as abused, if I'm remembering it correctly. You know what I mean? Um, I just said, I wonder if I was Christina, I would just keep quiet and put up with the old bat just to get the money. And then Haidez said, I think she disinherited all the kids. Yeah, didn't they? I mean, they put that in the movie that, like, at the end, like they were reading the will, and it's like, yeah, my kids get nothing.
Yeah, what a bitch, huh? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I thought I read that it's like that wasn't entirely true, but maybe, or they just got like a little bit.
You're
But maybe
talking.
they did get nothing. I can't remember now. Because it's been a while since we did that show about her. Because I
Yeah.
think I looked it up because I was like, man, is that true that she didn't leave anything to her kids?
Carson Bander.
That's cunty.
Carson Bander. He said she wasn't welcome.
Yeah.
And it was because
I mean, there had to be a
she
reason.
had mistreated his staff. And he
Oh, so she's like a
and
Karen.
he came in there and he told her, he said, I'm you know, it was like, I'm happy to have you on as a guest, and I'm glad that you're here. But we do not treat our staff this way, and we will not tolerate this
Well, good for
because she
him.
was bullying a young girl who was just working and trying to make sure that she had coffee and stuff like that. And Carson heard about that. Carson cared about his people. If you fucked with any of the Carson staff, your ass was grass. He protected his own, and he was a Hollywood kingmaker, and he really would not let stars get out of line. And I respect Carson for that. He was, like I said, he wasn't a perfect man. He would get drunk and go to these fucking Hollywood parties and try to fight and shit. They'd have to put him in his limousine and get rid of him. But shit, I've done shit like that.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, it happens sometimes, fucking he was a good man in a bad city. Hollywood is corrupt, and he was trying to cheated on his wife, but that was just kind of the way they were back then. It was kind of expected if you were gonna marry a celebrity, he was gonna have mistresses. That's just the way the world worked back then. And it was a shame because his first wife was like, he knew her from his hometown and she was gorgeous. Remember her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's gorgeous. But, got big for his britches, Hollywood got him.
Yeah, you know how they do. They kind of get all this money and fame and think they can just do what they want.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Carson is that I knew him as a kid, fucking watching him on TV. I'm like 11, 12, 13, staying up late to watch Tonight Show. And he was probably my age when I first started watching him. I just thought he was just the king, you know what I mean? Because the world treated him as the king. All of America that was the dude who put you to sleep at night and told you what happened earlier on in the day. That's what it was. It was like the internet. And it was funny to think that he started off as a very shy young man, really, in his career. He was just a very shy guy. When you see him when he was really young, you're like, oh, okay, that's
unusually so. Like, he was very,
shy
very introverted. Elizabeth says justice for Joan Rivers. Yeah, I mean, Joan Rivers was like a cool ass chick, and like they did her and Johnny Carson have a rift.
Joe was hot, man. I don't know. I thought Joe was hot even as an old lady.
Yeah, I always thought she was like,
hot. Yeah, and her daughter was hot too. She's just a hot lady. I liked her, and funny.
Yeah, she's super
funny. Yeah. Good friend of Carson.
Yeah, they did have a falling out later on.
Yeah, Carson thought that she
honestly, we talked about this on the Johnny Carson show that we did, but I think that he overreacted.
Yeah, he was a prima donna by that time.
Yeah,
he
like what she did. I was just kind of like, that's what they fought about. It's like I didn't think it was that big of a deal.
Yeah, she got a show.
Like without telling him ahead of time, and I'm just like, yeah. So, like, I feel like he got like mad out of proportion.
Carson was a Hollywood gangster. If you were his friend, you were in his sphere, you were supposed to report to him. But he did have that kind of power. He could make or break careers easily. He could make or break a president. He had to be very neutral about politics. He played both sides because he knew there were Republicans and Democrats out there. And he didn't really want to show his hand. He just made fun of both sides, but he was polite to everybody. He was actually a Republican, but he didn't let people know that. He was just an even-handed kind of guy mostly. But like I said, what he did to Joan, nah, it wasn't this. Joan didn't betray him. She just fucking went for her career. That's all.
Yeah, I didn't really see any problem with what she did.
He took it as a personal betrayal.
Yeah,
I think he loved her actually. I think he had.
Well, it must have been like for him to react that way. I think he had a crush
on her.
Because like most of the time, people would be like, "Yeah, go girl, good for you."
I had a strange feeling because Joan was hot. I think he had a crush on Joan, and he felt that it was who knows? Maybe they had something going on.
Yeah, it could have been.
Yeah,
because like I said, it seemed out of proportion.
Yeah.
Granther says, I've been married 20 years, no mistresses. I couldn't handle the guilt. Plus, my wife is 13 years younger than me. No complaints with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what I mean. I kind of feel like it's not... Back then, I feel like it was, especially if you had money, like dudes had money, like it was like expected. I know some women didn't like it, but it was just kind of like, well, what are you going to do? That's just the way dude's going to dude. You know what I mean?
It was just the way the culture was at the
That's what I
time.
mean. So it's just kind of I feel it's like a lot less accepted nowadays. But
Yeah.
back then, like I said, I don't think people liked it. Like you'd still be like, but
They just kind of tolerated
they
it.
were just kind of like, yeah, well,
It
what are
was
you
the
gonna do?
same thing between fucking
That's
Billy
everybody
Idol
does
and
it.
his girlfriend. They never actually got married. They fucked around on each other,
Yeah,
and they fought over
they
it. But
fought and broke up and
but then they
fought and
get
broke
back
up, but then
together.
they get
Yeah,
back
get
together
back
and shit like
together.
that.
And really, I saw a documentary. He shouldn't have ever. He shouldn't have ever really broken up with her. He should have stayed with her. They were best friends.
Yeah, well,
You know. But babies got in the way.
fucking babies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So so yeah, so I kind of feel like I don't know. I'm not really sure where I stand on this. Like I said, it's not I don't read a lot of self-help or any of these kind of misery porn kind of but I know some people like those and it's like I'm not going to shit on it or anything. And some people find them really helpful. And honestly, if this book like helped one person like get through their childhood trauma, then that's a good thing. But on the darker side of that, um this whole genre of which this book is a part, you could argue that it might inspire some kind of weird voyeurism or competitive victimhood where people are just trying to put out books with more and more fucked up shit like for prurient interests, I guess. And because people buy them, authors and publishers feel the need to like exaggerate or like pump things up, which kind of like I said might give some blowback to some actual trauma survivors because it's like then they're not believed because this thing over here was kind of bullshit. But like I said, there's a good side to it too. If people read it and relate to it and like it helps them with their own recovery or whatever, then that's a good thing too. But it's just kind of like it's just such a double-edged sword that and like I said, and I hesitate to anybody that talked about their childhood abuse, I hesitate to say, oh, you just made that up because I know horrible shit happens. Like nothing that this guy said in his book, um, was crazy. It's not like he was talking about the shit from the Satanic Panic where like the kids saying that like they got flushed down the toilet and then Chuck Norris was there and
And they left in a balloon.
and they left in a balloon and all this stuff, which is
Yeah.
obviously not true.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Chuck Norris was at the Satanic Panic. That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah.
Just that whole fucking story.
Yeah.
But they said they went to some tunnels, like, but they got there by flushing themselves down the toilet.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. They ended up in an underground cavern because they got flushed down the toilet and they went down there.
Yeah.
And then they bad shit happened. Chuck Norris was there.
Yeah, I don't remember what Chuck Norris was doing.
Yeah, and I think Chuck Norris arrived in a balloon or left in a balloon. I forgot. They left in a balloon.
Could he fly? I don't even remember all the
Yeah,
details.
yeah.
They were very silly.
Yeah, hot air balloon.
Yeah, it was a
A
hot,
hot air balloon.
Which like those exist, but come on now.
No,
So
Satanic
yeah.
Panic was bullshit.
Well, yeah, that was all bullshit.
Yeah.
And even the stuff that theoretically could happen, yeah, like somebody could sacrifice a baby. That could happen, but it's just the extent of the network that they're talking about is beyond the pale. Like there's no way that all of that could have happened without anybody noticing. Like I said, yeah, there's like some isolated cases here and there, but it's not like some big organized conspiracy or anything like that. But I think smaller things like this, does some of the stuff sound exaggerated? Yeah. I'm not gonna lie. But on the other hand, like I said, I've read about lots of child abuse cases or murder cases or something like that where shit as bad as this or worse has happened, and that's like really well documented. So I'm not really gonna 100% call bullshit on it. Even though probably, like I said, he did have incentive to exaggerate, but what are you gonna do? Like I said, if it makes you mad, don't buy it. That's about all I can say about that situation because they wouldn't make it if you didn't buy it. It's just kind of simple. And honestly, I can't really criticize because I'm like the biggest true crime junkie, as weirdly like a lot of women are. And like I said, I'll watch hours and hours of true crime. I don't give a shit. And like Tom gets really, he's like, man, can we just please watch something else? And I was just like, but it's only been 6 hours. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like, this is good. But you know what I mean? So I'm fascinated by that shit too. And like the more lurid and the more horrible it is, the more interesting it is. It's just, I'm not trying to justify it. It's not great, but I don't know. That's just the way most people are, I guess. Like, nobody likes boring, mundane shit. It's, who the fuck likes that? Nobody wants to see the things, oh, everybody lived happily ever after. Yawn. Everybody wants to see like some scary shit. Cause it's not normal. Most people's lives are just regular, you know what I mean? Most people's lives, you just get up, you go to work, you feed your cats, you do whatever. It's like mundane. So it's almost like a thrill, like reading about some fucking crazy horrible shit that happened, because you hopefully that doesn't happen to you, but it's just exciting, it's injecting some excitement into your life at the expense of like some other people who real horrible shit happened to. I was actually watching on Netflix last night. I found it was only 4 episodes, because you know how I think I did I talked a little bit about that show Worst Ex Ever, and they did one called Worst Neighbor Ever, and it was 4 episodes. They were each about an hour long, and I watched them last night, and those were really good too. They talked about that one that happened in where the fuck did that happen? The one where that house blew up in
Yeah.
that neighborhood.
Yeah.
Um, holy shit! I think you were in the bathroom, but they had like drone footage of it like in the daytime, because it happened at night.
Yeah.
But then the next day they had holy shit! I couldn't believe the fucking damage.
Yeah.
Like 3 houses were completely destroyed.
Yeah.
They said that a bunch of the houses in the neighborhood had to be torn down because they were just so fucked up.
What did he use? Wasn't dynamite. It was
No.
gas, wasn't it?
Yeah, what he did, it was him. It was the boyfriend. It was the woman that lived there that owned the house, whose name was Muncie. And she had this boyfriend who looked like an old version of like somebody from a 2000s boy band. Like he had the frosted tips and the puka shell neck. It was it was a choice.
Yeah.
And he was like one of those scumbags that like scams women on dating sites. Like he'll pick up a woman who's kind of maybe like a little bit older or a little bit desperate or whatever, and then like he'll wine and dine her for 2 or 3 months, and then start borrowing money. Oh, hey, I really need this, and I don't have my rent, blah blah blah, and then like he'll take off. Like he did that a bunch of times. And so he hooked up with this woman, and he moved into her house. It was a nice house. It was like a nice neighborhood, and I want to say it was Illinois or Ohio or somewhere. I don't remember where it was, but it was a pretty big. I remember it being on national news at the time. When did it happen? 2017, 2018, something like that. And so their house blew up when they were like for real blew up. There was like footage of it because people were filming with their phones. And it was a huge fucking explosion. And they were not home. However, the explosion killed their neighbors. It was like a young couple that lived next door to them because it fucking trashed their house. And the house on the other side, the roof fell in and it fell on the mom and the daughter. And they would have died too, but they got pulled out like at the last minute before the house collapsed. And they found out later, because what had happened was the woman and her boyfriend, Muncie, I think his name was Mark, and they were at a casino when it happened, and then they called them and said, hey, your house blew up, you might want to like come back home. Well, you don't have a home anymore. It's just like fucking a blackened hole. So they came back and they're like, oh no, oh god, oh, and they were making this big deal. But then it didn't take very long to find out that the fire, or the explosion rather, had been deliberate. And how they did it was Mark and his brother, who was also a co-conspirator, figured out, they asked somebody that they knew that had worked for the gas company, well, theoretically, I'm not going to do this, but theoretically, how would you fill your house with gas, natural gas? And so the guy was like, well, you'd have to disable this, that, and the other. I don't remember what all they said, but they said like specifically what they did, like you had to disable this, that, and the other thing. So they did that, and then they put like a metal thing in the microwave and set the microwave, because the microwave had a timer. Like you could have, which I don't know why you'd ever need this except for this situation, I guess. But it's like you could set it like 24 hours ahead of time. Like in 24 hours, I'm going to need to microwave some Jiffy Pop or whatever, microwave popcorn or whatever. And so that's what he did. He had the brother go there. Him and the girlfriend went to the casino so they could be seen on the cameras, so they would have an alibi. And then he had his brother on the down low go in the house, put this metal thing in the microwave, and set the microwave for 24 hours in the future. So the house would blow up. They had attempted it twice previously, like on the 2 previous weekends, but it hadn't worked. Like enough gas hadn't got into the house to blow it up. So this was their third attempt. They found out later, and they didn't even really feel bad about it. Like I think they wanted the insurance money, is what they wanted. So they wanted it to look like an accident. But then because it had failed the first 2 times, they went whole hog. They even poured gasoline all over the house. We're gonna fucking make this thing blow up this time. But them doing that obviously made fire marshal and everything like really suspicious. They're like, well, this looks somebody deliberately did this. Houses don't just blow up like this from natural gas. It just doesn't happen. So yeah. So they got caught and it was like insurance. But apparently their story, because they got story out of her, she got a lesser sentence, not that much lesser. I think she still got 30 years or something like that, and she's not gonna live that long. But for her to like turn on the other two and tell what the plan was, and she said, well, it wasn't supposed to, it was just supposed to set the house on fire. It wasn't like supposed to be a whole fucking nuclear explosion. Um, but she didn't really seem to feel bad that she had killed her neighbors. Like she killed this nice young couple. You know, the wife was like a kindergarten teacher or something like that. Like they looked like really nice people, and they died in the fire. Like they were so fucking burned they couldn't even identify them. They had to use dental records, and they didn't even feel bad about it. So I mean, but they all went to prison, and it was just I could not believe the fucking devastation. Because like I said, you saw the explosion because somebody was outside. They heard a boom, and everybody in the neighborhood heard it, and so like everybody rushed out. It was like, what the fuck was that? You know what I mean? And so people started filming it with their phones because it was recently, so everybody had cell phones, and it was a huge, huge, huge explosion. And yeah, when they showed it the next day, it was just, man, 3 houses, which is nothing left of them. It was just blackened rubble. And then like the houses on either side and across the street and everything like that had like fucking shit blown off, garage door blown off, door blown out, like all this other kind of shit. And like I said, a bunch of the houses around it had to be torn down because they weren't structurally sound anymore. But that was a crazy, crazy story. But like, yeah, it was on Netflix. Like I said, it was a pretty famous story at the time that happened. I kind of remember hearing about it. But that was on Netflix on Worst Neighbor Ever. So I got all into that because you know how much I love the true crime thing. And then before that, I was watching a 3-part thing about Steven Stainer, the kidnapping of Steven Stainer, which I still want to do a show about one of these days. Where spoiler alert, like he got kidnapped and then returned, or he escaped like many years later, and then later on, his older brother became a serial killer. So
Yeah,
so yeah, that was kind of
that was wild.
that was a fucking crazy ass story. I had forgotten about that aspect of it. I remembered him getting kidnapped and then coming back.
I was looking at that shit and I was going like, that explains a lot of how the medieval mind works. About how evil can spread and it's contagious from one person to the next. The devil got into him, weird shit like that. Because something bad happened to him, he became something bad.
Yeah.
Which that a medieval person would have thought of it as evil being contagious.
Yeah.
But
Which it can look like that.
It can look like that, yeah. The medievals were not stupid. They just had a different way of understanding things. They just had a different way of talking about it. They saw everything from a mystical and a religious point of view, not science.
Yeah.
But then psychology is not a science. That's more like a philosophy, which is mysticism. Mysticism, really.
Zombie Burner says, if my house blew up, I'd be on the toilet when it happened. That's how I'd die, exploded while on the shitter. I mean, I would hope not. I don't know what the people were doing in their house when it blew up. But it just pissed me off that these assholes were like, blew up their own house for the insurance, and they didn't even give a shit that it like killed their neighbors and almost killed their neighbors on the other side too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just, ugh. It was a horrible story. But I said all that to say that it's like I can't really judge people that read all this misery porn like about child abuse and everything like that, because I'll sit and watch true crime all fucking day long, like people getting tortured and murdered in horrible ways and shit like that. So I'm also a culprit. And like I said, I don't know why. It's just it's excitement in your life, I guess. I don't know. Zombie says, evil kind of is contagious if you think about it. It can
Yeah,
be, for sure. It can
yeah.
be.
Well, even Friedrich Nietzsche says, "You would stare into the abyss too long, you become the abyss. He who chases dragons too long becomes a dragon." And the medievals would say, "Yeah, uh, uh, evil things happened. The devil got into you. You know, fucking, you're around all this evil and it goes into you. You're infected by it."
I kind of feel like that was one of the main themes of that movie Manhunter, maybe more the book.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, Red Dragon, where
yeah.
because that guy was chasing serial killers and it's like didn't want to become
Become a
like
serial
that
killer.
because you
Yeah,
kind of have to think like them to catch
yeah.
them.
What happened to that dude's brother is that he was constantly kind of having these dreaded fantasies about what was happening to his brother. He had these, in dread. He's going like, "What are they doing to him?"
Yeah, because he
And
was
he's had,
gone for 7 years.
yeah, he's imagining in that, those ideas were like oppressing him. And eventually, what he did was he said, instead of being oppressed by these ideas, I'm going to own them. I'm going to become the dragon, so I can be safe from that, so it won't happen to me.
Yeah.
That's what he did. So he
I think
became a
that was
serial killer.
probably. I mean, I think they did say later on that he kind of had some fucked up ideas about like was into torture and violence, like even from when he was a kid. But I
But
think that his brother being taken
activated it.
activated
Yeah,
that, and like you said, I think it was exactly that where he was just kind of like tired of being a
a victim
victim of
of it.
it,
Of it.
and
Yeah,
he's just gonna, well, I'm just gonna be the perpetrator, which
yeah.
I feel like that's it's not super common, but um it does. Well, you see it a lot in child abuse cases where, sometimes the abused child will grow up and also abuse their children. They call it the cycle of abuse. I mean, they call it that not for no reason. So, um, and a lot of people really have to go through a lot of shit like to prevent that from happening because it's like you're so used to the dynamic being like that that it's kind of hard to get out of that mindset. And like I said, sometimes when you've spent your whole entire childhood being a victim, like sometimes you just want to lash back out. Like you want the experience of being in control, of being the boss. So, you know, I think that's kind of what happens in a lot of cases. Not, I don't know what the statistics are because I know a lot of abused children grow up and are fine, like they don't abuse their own children. But it is common enough that, it's talked about a lot. All right, so we're gonna wrap it up
Yeah, go
for
ahead and wrap
the
it up.
evening.
And
It's
we're gonna be
getting
back Friday.
We'll be back Friday
Oh, wait
for
a minute. Or is Abyss on Friday?
no.
Okay.
Abyss is the Friday after that.
All right.
Like
All
so
right.
it's
Good.
not this Friday, it's the following Friday.
Yeah. So it's gonna be a regular new wave night at the club. That'll be good too.
Yeah, it's 80s this Saturday.
Yeah. I can't believe this week is almost over already.
It
It's
go, it,
hump day. Tomorrow, when you guys wake up, it'll be Thursday.
it does go
The
fast.
work week is almost over.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
that's fine with me.
Yeah, we're retired. Well, I'm retired, and
I
she
was
works
like,
from
I'm not
home.
retired.
She works from home.
I
She works
wish
from
I
home.
was retired.
Yeah.
But I'm not. So yeah, so I got to get up early and do shit and everything like that. But it's all right. It's all right. Gotta make money somehow. Gotta keep hustling. All right, so we are going to wrap it up for this evening. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed the show, if that's the word. Yeah, so hopefully, you guys have a good rest of your evening. Have a good day tomorrow. We'll be back again for the Sidetrack show on Friday night, having some drinks and ushering you into the weekend talking about bullshit or whatever topics you guys want to talk about. So yeah, hopefully we see you guys then. Thank you very much for hanging out with us this evening. Thank you for your super chats, and we will see you guys again on Friday night.